We did it, Cullen. We finally did Egyptian mythology like we said we would.
Like we said, I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed talking about Frozen,
Loved it.
but we still are going to be talking about hearts as the center of being in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be talking
Hearts,
about
brains, eyes,
eyes, wings,
wings. I'm
head,
surprised.
wings, eyes,
Guts,
guts.
heads, brains, eyes, wings and hearts, wings and hearts. I made it work. I did it.
uh, yeah. So, welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the podcast where we talk about the lore behind our favorite and least favorite fantasy films. I'm Cullen.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we have a special guest, the host of the podcast Altered, Alexis Jacobson.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Welcome, welcome.
You have a special connection with this film. Would you like to share that with our?
It's our favorite film.
It is my favorite movie. So I worked on Gods of Egypt a long time ago. I essentially, just to give you some kind of information about how I got involved with the movie. So I moved out to Australia with my now husband back in 2013. And I was in Melbourne, Australia for like 10 months, couldn't get work, really hard to break into the Australian film industry as an American. Gods of Egypt came about, or this film, I should say, shooting in Sydney that was going into like previs. And it was oddly enough an LA-based previs or an LA-based visual effects company that got my foot in the door within the Australian film community because like someone knew someone. And then before I knew it, 5 days later, I moved to Sydney, had a sublet, started the movie 2 days before my 30th birthday, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was brought on for pre-production, working in previs. And then I was invited to stay for the shoots. And then I transitioned into tech viz. So I was kind of like in the office, half on set, helping problem solve. Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm excited to see your insider take as well, especially because there's some really cool visuals in this movie.
Yeah.
And you also worked on some other iconic movies like Voyage of the Dawn Treader and Clash of the Titans, one of the few movies I've seen in theaters with both my parents.
Oh.
I'm honored.
Yeah, it was 3D and the effects were coming out. And my mom was like trying to touch them.
Really? Wait.
It was just like the first one. I think like the visuals thing. Like she obviously knows it's not there.
Yeah.
But like she was just like, oh, like reached out.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Clash of the Titans in this movie, I feel like are soul sisters.
Oh, absolutely. I could not stop thinking about it. And it's so funny that you also worked on that one. Well, when was that one? Like 2012, 2011?
Oh my God.
Was it earlier than that?
Oh.
Yeah, it was earlier than because I was in high school. I wasn't with
Yeah.
I was in
man.
college.
I want to say 2011, 2012, I think. I mean, we could Google it. Here we are just hemming and hawing.
Oh my God, 2010. So I was probably on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Thank you, Cullen, for making me feel old. I appreciate that. Yeah.
No, this
Starting
is
off on a great
iconic.
foot, yeah.
Well, I mean, we could have said the 1981 version, and there's also one that's like way older than that. So we didn't do that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brought it back off. Yeah. That Clash of the Titans was the first. It's funny you mentioned the 3D because that's what I worked on for that. And that was the first movie to be put through like the 3D conversion process. And we had something like 10 weeks to do everything.
The whole movie.
And that was a crazy experience. That was like 100+ hour work weeks towards the end. Yeah, it was an adventure.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep that in mind when we make it around to the Clash of the Titans franchise. And I don't think we'll do all of Narnia all at once because I feel like those movies they're not like Lord of the Rings where you kind of have to review them all at once. They're
right.
Like, whenever. Yeah, because my hot take on the Dawn Treader is I actually don't like that book that much. And it's a lot of people's favorite Narnia book. So people are like, well, they made so many weird adaptational choices, and I'm like, yeah, because that book is so hard to adapt to like a movie. It's like episodic, like there's no overarching plot.
It's hard to beat the first one. It's just classic, and it was a pretty successful film adaptation for sure. It's been a long time since I've seen those though, and Clash. It's funny after you, I don't know if you find this with yourselves, like once you work on a movie, you don't watch it for a very long time because you're just like, it's so ingrained in you. But it's so interesting when you do watch it after such a long period that you do remember certain sequences or certain shots, or like, oh wow, I was on set for that, and that either looks awesome, or wow, that could have been done so much better. But
yeah. I mean, I remember seeing a movie that like my company had like optioned or like started picking out when I was an intern there, and I remember reading the script, and then the movie came out and being like, oh, that's different, that's the same, you know, like what changed from the script. And I do remember kind of talking with some people, and we're like, okay, the script was better. Like it was still like a really good like movie, but it was like the script was better, you know. Yeah, and even just like a movie that we hadn't watched in a while, like when we watched Frozen, it was like so cool to kind of rediscover what had made people fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Because I think now as society, people are like, Frozen's not even that good. And I'm like,
Frozen is so good.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Yes,
especially knowing the story that it comes from. And it's like, oof. Like, wow, what a great way to take this central idea. Like, honestly.
Yeah. And of course, I think Idina Menzel should do a holiday movie every year, because I feel like that just makes the holidays that much better as well.
Yeah, just like every year I need a new Idina power ballad to get me through that next year.
Bring it back to Disenchanted, as we were talking about.
Yeah, I love that song that she sings, which is funny too, thinking about Idina Menzel being in the original Enchanted and how much like she was not a household name when that movie came out, and now she is, you know, like.
Wasn't that also when John Travolta mispronounced her name at the Oscars?
That was Frozen.
Adele Dazeem.
Adele Dazeem. Yeah, we love that joke. More to make fun of John Travolta than.
Yeah, absolutely. Adina. Like I was mortified for her, but I was also like, wow, he's weird.
That was
such a strange guy. Yeah.
That was the moment that made me stop watching the Oscars. Like, unless I'm invited to an Oscars watch party or something, I'm like, no, thank you. Because
even then I don't watch it. I just sit there and gossip.
I loved Frozen, and I was so excited. I'm like, she's gonna sing "Let It Go," and I remember listening to like a 5-minute version of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" sung by Pink, and being like, okay. But then they're running overtime, so then they like cut part of "Let It Go," which is like a 2.5-minute song. It's not a long one. This isn't Stairway to Heaven, and they like sped it up. So then so they introduced her wrong. They sped up the song, and her voice cracked. And I was like, you just humiliated.
Yeah. Also, legend. Like I can't imagine she had a lot of time to like warm up, and for some of the notes that she has to hit, like you gotta warm up for that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A pro like her, especially a pro like her.
Yeah, and they sped it up. She had to go. Like I'm like, I don't think that was physically possible, and I was just so mad. And I was like, how dare you do Idina like this? Yeah, she deserves better.
This is why we should boycott the Oscars. That's the only reason.
The only reason.
Yes.
Yeah, if the white supremacy isn't enough, the way they treated Idina Menzel.
Yes, exactly.
I always think of the line in Community where it's like, I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty.
You can excuse racism?
Classic. Such a good show. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Alter? Just kind of give the listeners an idea of what your podcast is about.
Yeah. So Altered was kind of inspired by my having to replan my wedding 4 or 5 times before it actually happened during the pandemic. And my close friend Andre and I decided we had been wanting to do something, and it just felt so right to do something at that point when we were all like locked down, feeling pretty kind of lonely and disconnected from people. And it was so awesome, and it was almost like therapeutic talking to people around the world who are going through similar things with having to replan their weddings, and how every country, like we talked to someone in Australia, and like throughout the US, and just like depending on where you are, how different parts of the world were handling the pandemic and then affecting their wedding. So it was, it's called Altered. I know we've been wanting to pick it back up. We have not picked it back. Oh my God, our last episode was released July 23rd, 2021. But we do want to go back into it at some point. Yeah.
And I think that's such an interesting topic because like I remember, you know, my friend Emily, like me and my friends were all like, she was a friend from college, and we're all like, we're so excited for Emily's wedding. We're all gonna get together. It's gonna be like a reunion. And then it was like moved, and then it was still like Michigan was more open than other parts, and even Michigan was like divided into how people felt about being in public spaces with or without masks.
Yeah.
And so it just wasn't like that thing that we were all hoping for. And she still got married. Like, I'm happy for her, like that it was able to work out, because that's what matters, right? But it's still like, oh, like it's sad that like, because we all wanted to be there to support her, and like we were excited to share this moment with her, and like it just didn't play out the way we had planned, which, you know, best laid plans of mice and men, or of the Egyptian gods, you know, they don't always work out.
I love how you're just working that in there. Yeah,
we love a segue.
Segue moment.
Yeah, so Gods of Egypt, a 2016 film. You know, some people
2016?
Yeah, some people would say this is why
feels like yesterday and 30 years ago.
30 years ago, yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that was when Voldemort took power as well.
Yeah. Or Set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, or
God.
Set, yeah.
Crazy.
Thou, he who shall not be named.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
It's weird. The pandemic has screwed with my idea of time.
Yeah.
And so like I'm having a big problem with that watching Glee right now, with just like this song came out when, and this also happened at the same time Glee was airing. That's crazy. This is like, how can all of these things be contemporary to each other? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
My brain kept saying, oh, this was 4 years ago. And then I'm like, nope.
Yeah. Nope. No, it wasn't.
It does feel like we all lost like 2 years of our life. Like everything was just put on pause. It was such a fucked up time. Like there's really no other way to describe it.
Yeah, I had a cousin turn 24, and I was like, she can be 24, I'm 25. Then I'm like, I'm 28.
Yeah, aging also paused.
Yeah, so we're talking about, yes, Gods of Egypt. Have we all seen this movie before watching it for this podcast? I saw it for this podcast for the first time.
What?
I pulled up Tubi. 13 days till it expires on Tubi. So I was like, they're gonna renew it.
They always do. That's so interesting. I've seen this movie probably like 3 times now.
You're a stan.
I love ancient Egyptian mythology, like legitimately, but also I was like, oh, this movie is not going to be great, and I love watching bad movies, and that's kind of what I did. I was like, I love this. This is just, it's so enjoyable. I was like, I could literally just like restart it and watch it again. I loved this. No idea what happened, but I loved it. Loved every second of it.
I had not seen it since I saw it before it came, or when it came out with my crew. So this was the first time in 6 years. Rewatching it and reliving the traumatic part. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
There is that, like, because you see, I don't have, I'm not at the same stage of my career, but like in high school I worked on this like independent like Catholic film that like some lady at my church was funding, and so like when I show that movie to people, sorry, it's not very good, but like when I show people that movie,
it's like, so good. Tweezers.
I like explain like, okay, well, this was happening when we filmed this, and and like all the like the layers of tea, and it was like all people who knew each other, so it's like, it's not just the drama that's happening on set that day. This drama goes back to 5th grade.
Yeah. I remember you showing it to myself and a couple other people, and literally we were like trying to grasp what was happening in this movie. But I'm so glad Cullen was like, okay, but behind the scenes, I don't know any of these people. I was like, oh my God, she did what? That's crazy.
Yeah, it was also, I need to, the way it's edited and written, I had also to explain the plot of the film, what is connecting these scenes. Yeah,
because it wasn't in the movie itself.
Yeah. The Nazis boycotting this person's funeral and like trying to stop people from going. They didn't make a scene of that. That was all just in the background. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm impressed that you made a movie. You said in 5th grade?
Or no, I was like 15. I was the key grip. I didn't know anything, but
hey, I think that's amazing. Like being young and like learning different parts of the film industry and being on set and just being a sponge is the best.
It did teach me a lot. Like I probably wouldn't have understood like white balancing until like I took that class in grad school, except I learned it, like, so it's like you learn the basics and you realize how much is actually doable and achievable, but it also shows you the value of a good script.
Yeah,
you can make a movie on a low budget or a big budget, but like that foundation needs to be there.
Yeah. And that's something that I think I am giving these movies that we do on this podcast more credit, is that like Glee, I was put through the ringer and it put me through the ringer. But these movies, it's like, well, there has to be something there that people were like, yes, this is going to be great. And so then like, I'm always remembering like, okay, maybe they just decided not to do what was in the original script. And I just have to accept that,
That all those stages of development, like an episode of a TV show doesn't go through, like a pilot does. But like when a TV show is greenlit, they just have to be churning out these episodes, whereas like a movie can really go through decades of development.
Yeah, I do remember the Gods of Egypt script was very colorful. A lot of rewrites were being done, and like also actors doing rewrites up until like the last minute.
Love that.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Well, it's in seeing this again, it really, and you talking about a good script, there's so many things that have to come together for a movie, and like it's so interesting when you like, it's a good cast. I know we'll get to certain elements of it, but on paper, like they're a solid group of actors.
Yeah.
The director had a great legacy and super smart and like super fun to work with. But it's like, what goes wrong? Like, how can something that could have been so good go so wrong? Like some great moments. I have to say I'm super proud of my previous team, because I think the strongest moments in the film were the action moments, which we helped Alex kind of figure out. But in terms of the story and like the acting not being as consistent, and I think honestly it was probably Gerard Butler doing some of his own rewrites that led to some of those moments.
That's the first person I thought. I was like, oh, Gerard isn't there, like,
it was him.
His Scottish accent being like, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. I have to just say, one of my pet peeves about film is like, if you have a film that's taking place like in Egypt, you'd expect them to all have this like a similar accent or
a consistent one.
Just be consistent. Like it makes no sense at all. Why? Anyway.
Yeah,
I'm living for this conversation.
It's because it's a mythical version of Egypt, right? Like you're not watching it this for historical accuracy, and
no,
the movie does a good job of
well, also
that.
this movie confirms the flat earth theory, so
oh my god, it does. I forgot that until I watched it.
When that happened, my boyfriend and I were watching it and we both just stopped and then screamed.
This movie was directed by Alex Proyas, who directed iRobot.
Interesting.
It was written by Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, writers of Morbius.
Okay, some things are adding up here.
It's Morbin time.
I can't wait to do Morbius, because we have to do Morbius. But anyway.
I was rereading like a script I'm in the process of doing, and I realized there's a Morbin time joke, and I'm like, I have to change it. That's already dated.
It's already so old, yeah.
Like it was already not even that strong of a joke, but I was like, But it stars Brenton Thwaites, whose career is playing my niche childhood heroes, because he also played Dick Grayson in the TV show Titans, and Prince Philip in Maleficent.
He was also, wasn't he in The Giving Tree?
Or The Giver.
The Giver.
The
Yes,
Giver,
I always
yeah.
say The Giving Tree. Isn't
Different-
that the Shel Silverstein book?
We have Gerard
It's a great
Butler.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, Phantom of the Opera. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicolas Coster-Waldau, and
Game of Thrones.
Courtney Eaton. And all these actors are European or Australian. We have the
Chadwick
late
Boseman.
Yeah, that's because we have the late and iconic Chadwick Boseman. And we have Elodie Young, who plays Hathor. She is French and Cambodian.
She was in Daredevil season 2.
Yeah, like these actors have all like been in a lot of things. Obviously, Chadwick Boseman is like an icon, you know.
And I will just say he's so lovely. Like I got to meet him several times and had like I had just seen 42. I don't know if you've seen that about Jackie Robinson. I just seen it. I remember it was like that slow motion moment where I had like I'm a klutz. I tripped or something. I was like tying a shoe and he's walking towards me and I was like, oh my God, okay, here's my moment. I was like, hey, just saw 42. Just had to say I thought you were fantastic. And he was just so like down to earth and nice. And it was it was awesome. Such a who knew at that point that he would be Black Panther and so iconic in that role.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And honestly, he was my favorite in this movie. Toth was just
he was making some choices. He was making choices.
I loved it.
And I mean, you being clumsy and meeting Chadwick Boseman, that could have been the start of your Wattpad love story.
That's so true.
You know.
So true. It did not come to be, but and another life.
Boseman ex-reader.
So there was a whitewashing controversy about this movie, especially because 2 years before Exodus, Gods and Kings came out, and people were talking about, well, why is everyone white? So we'll do a brief. Let's talk about race in Egypt and ancient Egypt. We are all Caucasians here. We are not experts. I'm not an anthropologist or an archaeologist. I did a little bit of research. And so it's gonna be brief. This is by no means a
brief
definitive.
And surface level.
So Egypt is an iconic long-lived civilization. It's roughly from 3150 BC to 30 BC is what we consider ancient Egypt. It's 235 years between the fall of Egypt with Cleopatra's death to the release of Chicken Little in 2005. So if that gives you...
That's correct.
That gives you a timeline.
We are in the year of our Lord Chicken Little 17.
And so historically, ancient Egypt is a symbol for a lot of things, whether that's art, learning, culture, decadence, magic, paganism, slavery, evil, lesbianism, all separate concepts. But Egypt has been used to symbolize that in a lot of different discourse. It played a major role in the Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, especially in the Passover story where Moses frees the Israelites from slavery. A story so powerful that the Confederate slave owners would have it edited from the Bible. So they would try and convert their slaves, but they didn't want them to know about this story where God is not on the side of people who own slaves. So it's a powerful story. Egypt was a big part of the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire and later the Islamic world. So Egypt has just had a lot of cultural influence. It's iconic. It is that girl. Race is a big deal in modern discourse on Egypt. So a friendly reminder that race as we view it now is a modern construct, not really based in any biological reality. So it's not, people in Egypt aren't thinking of it the same way we do. So that's why it's more complicated than like, okay, what race were these people? And unlike many other non-European nations, Egypt has been a major player in influencing the culture of the West, in its history, in its fantasy. Like Egypt has played a big role. So it's like in white minds throughout history, as opposed to places they didn't know about or were too far away. So that leads to a lot of art, especially movies, where Egyptians are played by white Western Europeans, or is depicted as such. So that's not really accurate. So this is a hot topic among, there's, people that called Hoteps, there's white supremacists, there's all these people who have opinions about what race the Egyptians were. So people have been doing DNA tests on mummies, and I read a little bit about it, but I am not in the position to tell you what the ancient Egyptians looked like. It's a long-lasting civilization. Like Nefertiti and Cleopatra probably did not look super similar. Like this is centuries of history, centuries of invasions, migrations, all this. But it was multicultural. I think that's the safest place you can land with political, racial, and cultural connections between the Near East. So Israel, Phoenicia, Canaan, Chaldea, Turkey, all those nations, and also African nations. It is an African nation. So there would probably have been many different skin tones throughout Egyptian history. But white and blonde probably wouldn't be the majority. So that's kind of where we're landing, is that I think in this movie, if you look at like the crowd scenes, the crowd is very diverse. And I think if the casting of the leads had reflected that more, I think that would have been fine. I don't think they all needed to be like one specific ethnicity, unless you're going with like modern Egyptians, again, that's just me, but so Egypt was very multicultural, but it just wasn't all white.
Yeah, I think that's a safe place to land. It's a lot more complex because like the discourse that we have now about race.
That's why it's like we have Chadwick Boseman, and we have Elodie, who is part Cambodian, and other than that, it's all like European and white Australian. So, and because this is a fantasy world again, right? But like it does lean towards that, and we'll be talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy soon, where they famously said they were casting all white for historical accuracy.
Yeah, because we all know that hobbits, which were real,
are white. Yeah,
white only.
White only, just like mermaids and
Well, okay, here's the thing. I might stand by mermaids being really, really white because they live underwater and they don't get a lot of sun. That I could believe, but they'd be really pale.
And mermaids are not just part of white lore. They're big in African mythology. The Fairy Tellers, that podcast has a whole episode on African mermaids.
I will say from a and then just I can't talk about necessarily the project I'm on right now with casting, but just having like a glimpse into it, I just find it disappointing. My background, I came out to LA for acting, and my background's in theater, Shakespeare specifically, and did want to do, and still want to do, meaty roles, more character driven. But it is really disheartening how coming out here, you begin to realize like it is more about marketability, and if you have a name instead of talent, and not to say that people who have been really successful aren't talented, but it's really disappointing that they're looking for the box office numbers versus like quality, and it's and who's the next up and comer. And I was actually surprised you mentioned that Brenton Thwaites was actually still working, because I didn't think he had been in anything since this, because he just kind of went off the radar. He didn't really blow up into
superstardom.
What has he been doing?
I mean, he's Dick Grayson right now. He's on Titans.
After Gods of Egypt, he was in one of the most recent Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Because I remember seeing that movie in theaters and being like, hey, that's the guy from The Giving Tree. I mean, The Giver.
The Giver. Yeah. He's like a solid working B-lister, I would say. Which isn't, I don't mean that like in an insulting way. Like, in like he consistently is booking roles, but he's not like Tom Holland.
Man, if they had put Tom Holland in that role, I feel like it would have been such a better.
They would have needed more bronzer though, I think, because I think Brendan Thwaites is from Australia, so he's got more of a tan, more of a base. England, they don't get a lot of sun as far as I know.
They do not. It's very rainy and cloudy. But I guess I just, from a casting perspective, that's always been something I've found really disappointing. I was not involved with the casting process on Gods of Egypt and didn't hear honestly all that much. I know that it was interesting rereading a lot of the articles that came out around that time, and specifically what Jerry was saying in press tours, even as of 2017, that they were just kind of a bit defensive about it, which I found surprising, and especially Nikolai as well, mentioned that what if the movie had just been called like Gods of War instead of Gods of Egypt, and would that have changed everyone's perception of the film? And I did, and I respect the fact that Lionsgate and Alex Proyas did apologize, but it's also like kind of too little too late.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I mean, the marketability is like a great point, is because like Gerard Butler was he was the action guy, kind of still is for
he was 300,
Yeah, so they're kind of harking back to that. Nikolai was in Game of Thrones at the time. I think Britton Thwaites was kind of like somewhat of an up-and-comer. Elodie Young, she was either about to or already did Daredevil. Chadwick Boseman was about to become Black Panther. It's like there's a lot of like very marketable people.
Yeah.
So
and I think
get that.
It was just like a cultural shift was happening. Like if Disney remade The Little Mermaid in 2016, it would have been a white actress, as Ariel. And I'm glad that they are pushing for diversity. But the reason companies like
it would have
been
Ariana Grande.
It would have been Ariana, yeah. But the reason companies like Disney do it is because it's marketable and it makes money. Like, people say go woke, go broke, and that's not really true. The only reason Hollywood ever goes woke is because it will make them money. Like that's how Hollywood works.
Go woke, avoid broke.
Yeah. And so that's what happened here, is they didn't adjust in time, or the cultural shift happened. And now people are like, well, why is everyone white? Whereas like this stuff they've been making Egypt movies where everyone's white as long as Hollywood's been a thing.
The Mummy, 1999. Like the guy who literally plays the Mummy, I'm pretty sure he's just an English dude.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't he the guy from Titanic, Billy Zane?
No, he looks very similar. But it's not Billy Zane.
It's not Billy Zane.
If it had been Billy Zane, I mean, the world would just have ended.
I mean, Elizabeth Taylor was like Cleopatra way back.
Yes.
The
60s, right?
Yeah.
So basically, like, they've been whitewashing Egyptian culture, I guess, because I mean, can we really call these movies Egyptian culture? It's pulling on the motifs.
So it's been happening for a while. My theory is the goddess Isis was pissed by her portrayal in this film and caused people to suddenly care about race. Because everyone else had been caring about race, but white Americans had been like, we don't need to worry about that. And Isis was like, now you do, now you care.
Yeah. So when I was watching the movie, for the listeners who can't see this, this is why I was late to recording, is because I had to find this necklace, which is a medallion of Isis, goddess of fertility. Again, love ancient Egyptian stuff. Oh, wait, hold on. I should have hung this up. When we were moving from Florida, Lyle's mom found, I don't know where it is, but she found like this like weird scroll portrait that was obviously not authentic, but it's literally like Egyptian hieroglyphics. And I should have brought it out for this, but but I also have that too.
I remember asking my parents as a kid, like, honestly, I'm still probably too old to ask this question, but I was like, do Egyptians still speak hieroglyphics?
Do they still speak hieroglyphics? I love that. That's so good.
They're like, well, no, that was a writing system. Yeah, so that's kind of the we talked about kind of the whitewashing controversy. So let's talk about the myths that this was based off of. So Egypt, super long-lasting civilization, complex, lots of different gods and goddesses that would kind of come in, become fashionable, become not fashionable. And so let's define a myth. So according to the dictionary, a myth is a traditional story.
Merriam-Webster or Google?
I think it was Oxford via Google.
Got it. Okay.
A traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, typically involving supernatural beings or events. So in the folklore space, people will refer to stories belonging to contemporary cultures and religions, including Egyptian polytheism, as myths. But that does not mean we're saying that's fake, because different people have different beliefs. So like people will say like Christian myth, and they don't mean that's fake. I mean, sometimes they do, but in general, they're referring just to like a story associated with a religion or a belief. So you have like creation myths, afterlife myths, end of the world myths, like that's just a kind of story. We're not, we here on Not My Fantasy, we are not here to yick anyone's yuck or yuck anyone's yak, whatever kids say these days. We're not here to say like that's not real, whatever. We're talking about like the genre of story.
Yeah, that's why I think like it's probably easier for people to understand it as like what they understand as a myth versus what they understand as what mythology is.
Yeah,
just like that's more like the study of myths, but people use that sort of interchangeably. So.
Yeah. So Egyptian gods were generally more benevolent than, say, like their Babylonian or Greek counterparts, and this kind of influenced like Abrahamic faith especially with ideas of like a happy afterlife. And then there's also a pharaoh who took the sun god Akhenaten, and he was like, we're monotheists now, we worship only him. But after he died, everyone was like, we hated that. And they went back to polytheism. Monotheism is over. And they like cut his name out of monuments because like, fuck that guy.
Damn.
Yeah. But you see an image of that deity that's like the first shot of Gods of Egypt. It's like the sun with like the hands reaching out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Egyptian, like any mythology, is going to have lots of variations. Like it's not just like one canon story, especially because even the concept of canon, that's like a Catholic thing, like canon law, like what's official, like what's official. So like that's not really how they viewed religion back then, and even not all religions today. So like myths are told in a variety of different ways. So I'm going to tell the kind of origin story that this movie is based off of as if it's one coherent story. Because that's how I read it as a kid. Like I got this book from the library and they kind of organized everything into one linear story. That's not how it was really consumed or viewed, and there's variations. But we're just going to use this kind of basic, fairly common way to tell the story, because like we could do an entire podcast just on Egyptian mythology, So
happily, I will happily do that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what local Egyptologist Hannah Sylvester her takes on the stories.
Listen, The Mummy changed my life. I literally have a book on archaeology that I got when I was like, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13, because I actually wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to be an Egyptologist specifically. So I'm literally not kidding. I wanted to be Rachel Weisz in The Mummy.
So, was it also Indiana Jones? I hope that got you to
also
that.
Indiana Jones.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had The Mummy first, and then you know how like teachers usually around this time, around Thanksgiving when we're recording this, they'll be like, I don't feel like teaching on the Wednesday before you guys have to go on your little vacation. We're gonna watch Indiana Jones. That's what my one history teacher did. And so Last Crusade was sort of my thing, but also the Ark. I don't like Temple of Doom, but anyway. But yeah, so like
Temple
those
of
movies
Doom scarred me for life.
It's scary. And we watched that. I was like 13 when we watched it. I was still like, this is intense for me.
The ripping the heart out and the bugs. No way.
And all the red and the blood. No. That's intense.
No, it's terrible.
And it's a prequel. And that's like the worst part, I think.
Yeah, the one with Sean Connery is definitely my favorite.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
And then it stopped after that. They never made another one.
Yeah.
Well, did you see they just released stills from like the one being shot, or I don't know if they're still filming or it's coming out? Is it the 5th?
I think they are making another one, and I don't think Shia is in it.
No.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
And he's not having a good time right now in culture.
In culture.
Yeah.
We actually, when I was working on Angry Birds 2 in Studio City, or actually Sherman Oaks, we would see him all the time at lunch because I always had to do runs to like pick up food for like this producer I was assisting at the time. And he was just always there at Mendo. He loves Mendo. So if you
Fair.
ever want a Shia
Perfect.
sighting, yeah, Ventura Boulevard.
A
There you
Shia
go.
surprise, if you will.
Yep.
Actual cannibal, Shia LaBeouf. Allegedly, according to the
Allegedly.
song. It's the song that he
Allegedly.
also gave a stamp of approval to. He's
Yeah.
in that video.
Oh,
He's in that
boy.
video, and there's
God,
real
I'm
cannibals
so
out
old
there.
on the internet. I'm referencing a video that came out probably like 9-10 years ago. Anyway.
Yeah, so speaking of old things, in the beginning it was just primordial waters. And then Ra, the sun god, comes out. He is usually depicted with a hawk head and a solar disc. So he's like, I'm gonna make some stuff. And so he makes Shu, who's the god of the air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Sorry 2011 internet, moisture.
Moist.
Oh no.
And Shu and Tefnut had kids. They were Nut, goddess of the sky, and Geb, god of the earth. Shu had to keep them apart because nothing could exist if they kept boning all the time.
Mhm.
And then also, brother-sister marriages are common in Egypt. Like culturally, that was a thing. So we're just gonna say that. So their kids were Osiris, Set, Isis, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder. Don't know anything about that last one. So Ra or Re or Autumn Ra, depending on the time in Egypt, he would ride a solar barge through the sky, passing through the underworld at night, and that was like the sun, because like the sun for them was like the source of all life. And he would fight the snake god. In this movie they call him Apophis. I've heard that's not correct, but there's this evil shadow snake who wants to devour the sun and like destroy the world, and different gods would help him fight the snake, and sometimes that god was Set. And this switching of Set from like a benevolent friend of Ra to like the villain, some people speculate was because Set was like the patron god of a certain dynasty that fell out of power, and so then it was like, oh, he's bad. Yeah.
That makes sense for this movie.
Yes. So let's get into kind of the passing of which Egyptian gods were king. And I actually think this story is very interesting. And I don't know, you could almost make a movie about it. So Pharaoh was getting old and humans were tired of him. So the first Pharaoh was Ra. Humans were like, we're done with him. And so he was mad. So he took out his eye, and that became the lion goddess Sekhmet. And she was obsessed with mass murdering everyone. And Ra couldn't get her to stop. So they dyed beer red, and she thought it was blood. And so she went to go drink it, and then she got drunk. And they used that to divide her into two beings, or like they could be two beings, or they could be the same goddess, but just like her Hulk form and her regular form. And that
Tatiana Slani.
Yeah. And that was the cow goddess, Hathor, goddess of love, beauty, sexuality, festivities, fertility, the sky, a bunch of shit. Like Hathor was a multitasker. Overachiever. So she was sometimes depicted as a cow, or the head of a cow, or a beautiful woman. But then if she was mad, she could be the lion goddess Sekhmet. But eventually it became like Sekhmet was an aspect, and then it was the cat goddess Bast, who was like a goddess of like protection. And they were kind of the good and evil sides of each other, just depending on the time in history. And like that does make sense, like lion and cat, a little more than like a lion and cow. But are those birds getting too loud?
They have a lot to say. They loved Gods of Egypt. I mean, I hear them saying it. Like, this movie is perfect.
Did I close the window?
Jerry Butler's accent is perfection. Accents. Sorry. Plural.
Yeah, so Hathor, she was called Mistress of the West. This had nothing to do with demons. This was because the afterlife was in the West, like in Lord of the Rings. And this was also like the graves would face west, because it's like facing the afterlife, which is modern graves face east. That's like a Christian thing. You face east because that's where the sun rises. That's like Jesus. So death and the afterlife were big in Egyptian religion. The jackal-headed god Anubis, like he would weigh, sometimes him, sometimes Thoth or Thoth. They would weigh your heart against a feather, and like based on your good and evil deeds. And if you were good, you'd get to the afterlife. If you were bad, there was this like monster Amut who would eat your heart.
Cute.
Yeah.
That's brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. So
two very different reactions to that.
Yeah.
Cute. Brutal.
So Ra was still in charge, but he was old. So Isis got not that Isis. That Isis
The Isis slippery.
Isis, the goddess of women, fertility, and magic. She used Ra's spit to make a snake. And the snake bit him, and it was and because it was Ra's own power that made the snake alive, he couldn't fix it. But she's like, I know a spell, but you need to give me your true name, like in Rumpelstiltskin. That's what she said, actually. Yeah, like in Rumpelstiltskin, you give me your.
The story that hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah. And so, but like the true name gave her power over him. So then she'd be like, okay, now it's time for you to retire and for my brother husband Osiris to be king. And so that's how Osiris gets to be king.
This is so much drama. I love it.
Yeah, it's actually like a really interesting like story. So Osiris is king with Isis. Set is unhappily married to. So in the Prince of Egypt, they say Nephthys. In this movie, it's Nephthys. And depending on the story, but we'll go with this because that's what the movie has. They don't have kids. Osiris is a god of justice and fertility. Egypt prospers. He's associated with like the rise and fall of the Nile. So that's why he has green skin. In almost every depiction, he has green skin. And so Set's jealous. Set is mayhaps an influence on Satan. A certain niche of modern Satanists do use Set's name. They call themselves like the Church of Set. And that's fun considering Set's main enemy is Isis, the goddess of women. So that's fun. But so Set is like a storm god of deserts, and he is the head of like an unidentifiable animal. Like historians have tried to figure out what it is, and they're like, we don't know. And they think it was something just made up. And then Isis and Nephthys were usually depicted as women with like crowns and wings, and Nephthys is like a more like associated with like funerals and embalming. Let's also mention Thoth. He's an ibis god, like he's the head of an ibis. He's the god of wisdom, the moon, magic, writing, often called the inventor of mathematics. So that's kind of our main cast, if you will. And then so at this festival, Set has a party. He invites Osiris. He has this big chest, and he's like, whoever can fit in it gets it. And Osiris is like, this makes sense. He gets in, Set shuts the lid and seals it. So he uses trickery, and then he throws it in the Nile. So Isis and Nephthys are like, let's go find him. Set becomes king. They find the chest, but Nephthys accidentally tells her husband where it is. And so he cuts it up in 14 pieces, scatters it. The goddesses
Horcruxes?
Yeah, Horcruxes. The goddesses.
This is literally Harry Potter. Okay, I know the story ends. Let's just get to the movie then.
Yeah. So the goddesses find it, and they find all of them except his penis, which was eaten by a fish.
Cute.
Brutal.
Very brutal. Yeah. Ouch. Yeah.
So they make a makeshift like wooden penis, and they perform a ritual that like brings him back kind of, and Isis and Osiris have sex, and Isis has Horus. Nephthys also gets in on the action, and she has Anubis. So then Osiris is like, I'm like back but not fully, so he becomes king of the underworld. Because he can't be like a Hundo P resurrected. He's like kind of in the middle. So he's in charge of the underworld. And Isis is like, my new focus is being the momager for our son Horus. Like that's her goal. So Horus was the falcon-headed god of like kingship and the air as well as light. And he fought Set for the throne over 80 years. So Thoth, Ra, and Shu were like a committee who gets to pick who's king. And so Thoth and Shu were like, okay, obviously not Set. He like murdered Osiris, like Horus. And Ra is like, Set's pretty strong. I don't know. And so they're like, okay, fine, we'll do challenges. So the first one is hungry hippos. They have to become hippos and hold their breaths. Isis is like, I'll just stab Set with a harpoon. And then he's like, hey sis, don't do this to me. Don't let me die. And then she helps him. Then Horus is like, you're fired. You're no longer my momager. Cuts her head off, throws it off a mountain. But Thoth is like, okay, that was extreme, and like refixes her head. So then Horus, tired from murdering his mom, is taking a nap. And Set's like, I'm gonna gouge his eyes out. Gouges his eyes out, Hathor is like, oh, and so she's cow goddess, pours milk on them, heals his eyes. So Hathor is sometimes married to Ra, or sometimes Ptah, god of creation. I'm always confused as Ptah fits into any of these stories.
Right.
But in many stories, she's with Horus. They're like the it couple. It makes sense. So, yeah. And then the committee is like, Horus and Set, you need to make up. And Set was like, well, I know a way to do this. And so, brief trigger warning. They're like, Set tries to sexually assault Horus up the ass because Egypt was not like, it was okay to be a top but not a bottom. Like that's kind of how Egyptian, and that's like a thing in the ancient world. But Horus like was able to like get it just in his hands, and then he goes to his mom and she's like, that's disgusting. She cuts off his hands, throws them in the Nile. And it's assumed that
Horus has his hands cut off?
Yeah, it's assumed he gets them back.
Jamie
but...
Lannister also had a hand cut off.
So she's like, yeah. But then she jerks him off into a
his
tub.
momager?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have hands.
Yeah. And she puts it on lettuce in Set's garden.
Lettuce? There's lettuce in this movie.
I know, I saw that and was like, is this a reference? So then Set loves this salad. He eats it. And then Set goes before the committee and is like, well, I get to be king because tops only. This is a tops only job. And they're like, we'll do the spell to figure out where this went. And then it calls out from the river and they're like, well, that's on the river. Then Horus is like, well, I topped him. And then they do a spell and it comes out of like Set as like a really cool hat, like a Sundisk hat, and Tote is like, I want it. And he takes the hat and they're like, well, obviously they're like, well, that was a wash. Next challenge, you have to do a stone boat. You have to sail a stone boat. Doesn't go well for Set because stone doesn't float, but Horus just paints a wooden boat to look like stone. And it's floating, and then Set is pissed, turns into a hippo, bites the boat, and they're like, well, that was fake. And then they're like, can we just like, okay, we need someone else. Let's ask Osiris. And Osiris is like, well, obviously my kid, like not the person who murdered me. Yeah. So that's how Horus becomes king and Set gets captured and put in chains. Committee.
Wow. I'm dying over the salad thing and the reference to lettuce in this movie.
That's some dark, crazy shit right there.
Yeah.
So you may be thinking as the story goes on, like, who's the consistent protagonist? And Isis, right? Like she's there at the beginning. Like she's before Osiris's reign, she's doing shit. She's doing shit before Horus is born. She helps Horus. So like Horus may be the Aragorn of this epic, but Isis is the Galadriel. Like she's like the main force through the backstory, through the current story. So she, at the very least, if I were to adapt this story, if she was not the protagonist, she would be a main character.
I see where your problem with God, your only problem with God's
my only problem. And so, but Isis was popularly worshipped like the latest of the Egyptian gods, even enjoying popularity in like the Greco-Roman world, and was sometimes associated with like Venus as like the mother of the Roman emperors. And that has a connection to, so Aphrodite whose Venus is a Greek form of the Phoenician goddess Astarte, who was derived from the Babylonian Ishtar, Sumerian Inanna. They were goddesses of love, fertility, and war. Astarte is referenced in the Bible as the wife of Baal, and Elijah doesn't like her. And then Anat was another Phoenician war goddess, and they were brought to Egypt by trade and were often worshipped alongside Set. So hence, Astarte and Anat are the names of those two ladies that ride the snakes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so that's that little aside. So that's basically the lore that this is pulling from.
Wow, that's incredible. And I mean, very little of that is in here.
But there's enough. Like you see the foundation, like they obviously knew this, Yeah.
Yeah, because like talking about like Set was married to Nephthys, and I mean, well, Osiris is dead in this movie, so he doesn't really have like
Yeah.
it's sort of like Ra is like the person who kind of plays that role in this movie. But yeah, there's a lot of really glad they took out the come in the hands thing from this story, didn't put it in that movie.
Yeah.
I think that was a good change.
Yeah, that would just be upsetting. It'd be upsetting. As much as the cum salad is a great comeuppance. You want some more ranch there? As much as that's like, I don't.
There's your episode tag right there.
Some more ranch.
Yeah, and before we even started this podcast, during the We Need an American Girl Doll Who trend, I made one of like an Egyptian one that looks like Isis with like We Need an American Girl Doll who like has her brother eat her son's cum on a salad or something.
Oh God.
So I knew we were gonna talk about this story.
Deep lore
Coming
there.
full circle.
Yeah, that was not in the children's book that I read. They did not.
I can imagine why.
Yeah. And yeah, glad, that's why you do need to deviate from source material.
Sometimes you have to.
Inspired by. Yeah.
Loosely inspired by.
Like Frozen, yeah.
Like Frozen, exactly.
Wow.
I'm happy that we did not have to see Osiris cut up into 14 bits though. Or the penis.
Too.
Yeah.
Getting eaten by a fish. Like I'm good to not ever go there.
I think that was one of Jerry Butler's changes. He's like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Boop boop. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the set Horus thing was in there. He's like, you want me to eat a cum salad? I was the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. I just, while we're kind of on some of the lore, I did find some art department photos that are really, really cool from way, way back. So this is like some of the displays from art department. It's just like the detail is just incredible.
Yeah.
Like walking into art department, like what the work they did was phenomenal. It was such a talented group.
That's so cool.
Kind of a closer head.
Yeah. Is that Hawthorne maybe with the cow horns?
I think so, right?
Yeah, I think
she wears that during the coronation, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Like the first big sequence.
I appreciate that in reviews as well. They're like, everyone is pretty much half naked throughout. There's like a lot of busty women things falling out. You don't want falling out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, visually, I would say there's some really cool visuals. There's like one visual thing that they did, like one motif that I really did not like, and we will talk about that when we get there. But like, I think a lot of like with those, like when you're swooping in over Egypt and it's like the river and the pyramids everywhere, even though that's not really what pyramids are for, but like the pyramids and it's like the ruby flower palaces and stuff. It's like, that's gorgeous. Like, that's cool. Mm-hmm. I want to play an Assassin's Creed game in that, and then eventually. So we're in ancient Egypt. We're in fantasy Egypt. Osiris is king. Everyone gets to go to the afterlife, right? It's free. Horus is going to be the king now. He likes to party.
And he likes to fuck.
He likes to fuck. Also, the gods are bigger than people.
Oh my God.
I think I do hate that choice. That must have been a pain to film.
That's what I really hard. I want to know everything because, like, obviously, like I've read some things about how they shot like Hagrid in Harry Potter, where he's like, I mean, Robbie Coltrane was a tall dude, but he was also somewhat normal size. And same thing with like the hobbits and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, but also like in those two movies, you can kind of understand like why they made that choice. I don't understand why this was a choice. I don't think they needed to do that. I don't know.
Because Clash of the Titans, they kind of glowed. I think they did the Hercules glow thing. But I guess they're like, that's Greek. The Greek gods glow. The Egyptian gods are tall.
Are tall.
I don't know why they're so tall. So when we first meet Horus, he's Horus. He gets out of like his bath or goes into the bath, and I just imagine like all these like regular sized people looking at this guy's like giant dong, and I'm just like, that's comical to me. It's like normal size on him, but it's just like enormous because he's enormous. I don't know.
Yeah.
I literally was like, that was like one of the first things I said. I think I wrote it down. It was like giant god dongs.
That don't get eaten by fish. Those are the big fish. So Horus has like a thing with Hathor, right? And he wants to make her queen despite her like vague bad girl past, and she wants to be like free. But he like fought demons for her, so she has the bracelet of 42 stars that like keeps her safe from the demons. This is nowhere. I don't like. We went over the lore this movie is based off of. I don't know where these demons are coming from. Meanwhile, in the streets, we have Beck. He is a blonde Aladdin. He is in his mid-20s. Like he is like I think like 24 to 27, like that age range, like IRL. But the CW has ruined my brain. So I saw this man, was like, that's a teenager. That's a 16-year-old.
Same. I was like, oh, he's supposed to be like maybe 17, 18. And I'm looking at your notes and you call Zaya his wife. And I was like, no, it's his girlfriend. They're children, right?
I think they're married, right?
I don't know. Because Lyle said the same thing. I was like, no, he's like 18. I don't
They
think
live in
so.
a house. And he talks about like, when I took you from your family, right? I promised you all these things. So it's like they're written to be like a young married couple.
Right.
But like because of the way Hollywood usually casts people.
Exactly.
And also just coming of age fantasy in general, I'm like, he's a teenager.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Is like this is also quite a bit of a coming of age story. I mean, in grad school, I did have a whole presentation in which I argued that pretty much every story can be considered a coming of age story. Not going to go into that, but happily would on another episode. But yeah, like, I was like, I don't know, but I also don't really care. And not that like I don't care about them. I love them. I think they're adorable. Yeah. Maybe that's why I was like, I don't believe that you're married. You're too happy, right?
Well, I think
marriage depiction, not great in Hollywood. Let's be honest.
Well, they also like live in a hut. They don't live with like parents or anything. So I'm like, they must have jobs. But he does not give me the vibe of someone who has a job.
No. Yeah, he's talking about how like, I'm gonna give you like 12 children. And I'm like, and you're gonna be the stay-at-home dad, right?
Yeah. So it's like I think it would have been interesting. It might have been better if he was a teenager. I don't know. I think we'll talk about protagonists later and like how to do that, and like there are different ways this movie had gone or could have gone, and I think they kind of like went for like a halfway, and I think that hurt the story. But I think Beck is fun. I think a lot of his one-liners though, I don't know, because I don't know if Brenton just wasn't in his acting bag or if like they were. I think they were
getting confirmation from someone on set. And going, there was no bag.
But like part of me is like, okay, these one-liners are also like objectively bad. I don't want to give him too much shit because I'm like, I don't know how you sell that.
Because I honestly feel like, again, we'll talk about the protagonist later, but I kind of feel like he's doing the best with what he was given, because this feels like a very empty Aladdin character. Like I think we're supposed to have seen Aladdin and come into the movie knowing that story. They're like, oh, he's Aladdin, except Jasmine isn't a princess, but he treats her like one. I kind of think it's like street rat or have that idea. But you know what? He's very lovable. Like, it's fine. He's fine. He's a good-hearted thief, like Aladdin.
Yeah. Alexis looks like she wants to say something, but she's being very careful.
I like your blonde Aladdin description of him. I guess that's the protagonist. Like he does have to. You have to see his change from start to finish, and like and the arc there is there, and it's probably one of the stronger arcs of the film, but it's still. For me, I think, and especially watching it again last night, his acting just fell so flat. I know the writing was definitely stronger in some places than others, and an actor can only do so much and with timing, but it felt like he was trying to go very like almost felt like very Disney, like a bit too over the top, and the others were playing it too straight. So it fell flat, and that was a bit of I thought that was really jarring at times.
I think
it is almost like they're in different movies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Horus and Beck.
Yeah. And that's interesting, but I almost think this story, I mean, like adapting the story minus the cum lettuce is like it almost would have made more sense as like a Disney family epic than as like a big epic, like like a big, like a Game of Thrones. Even though there's like murder and stuff, it still is like a good versus evil. Like I think this character Beck is very kind of Disney, and so I think you could have done like a more coming of age story.
I think it is two different movies because Nikolai Coster-Waldau is literally doing Game of Thrones. It's literally Jamie but in a skirt. And then he is this Disney version of Gods of Egypt.
Yeah, even just like him and Zaya's relationship, how they look is
she has a very sweet face.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, and they're very sweet together. And then it's like, I think it's the one thing like holds us down in this big grand idea of the fact that like they're a mortal world, but there are gods among them that they can interact with. And so like it's grounding us so much in that, because that other half is very crazy. So, but it doesn't quite match.
Yeah, and I mean he literally played Prince Philip, and then now like Dick Grayson, like they look Disney, that couple. Like
yes.
It's just there's like two kind of warring elements going on.
I wish Zaya were a bit stronger of a female character. She was pretty I'm not sure the right word to put there, but
we'll talk about her and how the story treats her as we go there. Not good.
Not well.
It's Coronation Day, as Anna would say.
It's Coronation Day.
For the first time in forever, Nepotis is showing up in her bird boat. Her little flying bird boat. Don't know where this came from. It looks cool. I'm like, why does she have a bird boat? And it is this, I don't know, but like there's a thing that like a lot of scholars of like these pagan, like non-Christian, like or like polytheistic religions will talk about, that when we try and talk about these religions, we want to be, this is the god of this. Like it's their job, they're in charge of this specific thing. But that's not exactly how it worked. It's more like this is a being and they're associated with all these different concepts. And sometimes they overlap, or sometimes they're opposed. And so like Nephthys or Nepotes like doesn't really fit into that, especially a lot of Egyptian gods are a little more nebulous in what they're in charge of. So that's why it's like protection. Like it's very vague. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And then also we'll talk more about how mythology and the superhero genre often in Hollywood films kind of overlap. So it's Coronation Day. Everyone's at the palace. They praise Ra. Osiris is there to pass along the throne. Tote is there. Hathor's there. So Set, he's in his Maleficent era. He shows up uninvited and is, instead of being sneaky like in the story, he's just like, my army's here, time for a coup.
Oh, he straight up like kind of Trojan horses it. He's like, I brought you a gift. It's this awesome horn. Try it out, bruh. And like unthinking, Horus is like, sure, blows horn. And then I was like, so theatrical. This was unnecessary. I love this entrance.
He's in his Maleficent era.
It's literally just all of the theater packed into one scene. And he's like, now it's time to fight.
he straight up kills Osiris. He gouges out the eyes of Horus after their little fight. He uses like flashies
I love
to
you say
like
little fight. They literally transform into their metal. We have to talk about this. They're metal
their
animal
robo god.
beings.
Yeah.
Yes, they're Iron Man suits, if you will. And they're flying around, destroying the city, killing hundreds of thousands of people.
People are fleeing. Beck and Zaya are separated in it.
Yeah, and that's what I was like, you called it a little fight. And then they get back on the stage, and then he
The stage.
but
Yeah.
doesn't even gout, like there's no knives involved. He just like pops
Yeah.
them right out of his head, and they glow.
Very
which is interesting.
kinglier. Yeah, they're glowing eyes. The Eye of Horus was like a big symbol in Egypt, like
Mhm.
a protective symbol.
Yeah.
So Hathor basically is like Set, like basically like spare him, you know, like
Mhm.
she saves Horus. And Horus is defeated because of they like just shine lights and he can't see.
Yeah, he's like, you never miss, and he throws a spear or something.
Yeah.
But he gets blinded by the light. Blinded by the light.
Yeah.
And then he gets jumped and his eyes are gouged out. And I was like, well, this is kind of wimpy. Like, that's not a great way to start with potentially one of your protagonists.
Yeah.
You know?
Horus is also called Lord of the Air, despite having no discernible air powers.
Good point.
Ra later offers him powers over the wind, and I'm like, isn't he Lord of the Air? Like, this
Isn't that
man
the same
lied
thing?
on his resume.
Wind is just manipulated air. It's just moving air.
Yeah. His LinkedIn is fake.
CEO of air.
Yeah. So Set, he's like, I'm a Jeff Bezos girl boss. You gotta pay your way to heaven. You gotta pay your way to the afterlife. Martin Luther shaking, pissed. So everyone is a slave now. We love stories.
He literally says bow down to everyone. He's like, bow down or be enslaved. They all bow down, and then he still enslaves them. I was like,
them all.
what a bargain.
We love a story about freeing slaves in Egypt as a society.
Oh, love Prince of Egypt. One of the greats. I mean, legitimately, I love that movie. But
I was listening to that soundtrack as I was like making the notes because I need to like get in the zone.
Into the Egypt zone.
Yeah, the Egypt zone. There's a musical now. Yeah.
Yeah. You're playing with the big boys now.
So
oh my god, that song actually goes really well with probably all of the fight scenes.
Just one of those fan edits on YouTube.
I'm gonna make one. It's gonna happen.
So they're building this like Tower of Babel obelisk to like impress Ra. It's like huge.
It's literally a big black dick.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Washington Monument shaking. So Set, he's defeated most of the other gods, but they're all in Nephthys like stronghold. So he's like fighting. So Hathor is like his queen, sort of like his mistress. And it's kind of implied that like she's doing this to protect herself and Horus.
Mm-hmm.
And like Set knows that, but he's like pretending it's not like that. Like,
or he's just using it to manipulate her and he gets off on that.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I read it.
And there's this annoying architect who Zaya is like his secretary, like she organizes his office. Zaya is a big believer in the gods, right? She like trusts in Horus. Beck is he like is a slave, but he can easily just go around and do whatever he wants. And then he's also what I call
kind of confusing.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. He's a Hollywood atheist, because a lot of white men, when writing these mythology movies, they're like, oh my god, everyone in this movie is straight and white, but they all believe in gods, and that's just that I don't feel represented. We need an atheist in here. Because then we need someone who's exactly like me. We can't have any slight difference. So
yeah, I also want to quickly talk about one of my favorite tropes in these kinds of movies is that to make the white people look more ethnic, quote unquote, they put eyeliner on them. And I love that because the architect also has some eyeliner going on.
Yeah.
Chadwick Boseman has some eyeliner going on. Love an eyeliner moment in these movies to make white people look ethnic.
Chadwick Boseman, not white. Want to clarify?
True. Yes. But it's like they take people and just like, this will make them look exotic. That's probably the better word, exotic. And I was just like, why? I love this.
Yeah, and because this also reminds me, in Troy, in Clash of the Titans, both center on a white male protagonist who like doesn't like the gods or doesn't believe in the gods.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, yeah, I almost think it would have been more interesting if Beck was a believer, because then the betrayal later is a little more personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That probably would have been a better choice. Better emotional payoff, I think.
Yeah, better, like, yeah, like just betrayal as opposed to like, yeah. So Beck and Zaya have a lot of freedom to do things. Like, I'm pretty sure like Snow White and Cinderella have less freedom in their lives at the beginning of their movies than these people. They're just like fully exploring the library and like looking at these like confidential plans.
Yeah, and like Cinderella isn't even like a legitimate slave, and Zaya is definitely coded as such.
Yeah, like they were just like servants, and they like could walk
but,
around.
Like Beck was doing hard labor,
allegedly.
But
he
did kind of run away very quickly.
Yeah, I'm like, they could, in Prince of Egypt, they could not do that. That old man was getting beat up.
Yeah.
So they're gonna seal back the Eye of Horus. They're gonna go into this pyramid. So Beck goes through these Indiana Jones like traps. Do you remember? This is such a neat. Do you remember Johnny Thunder? It was a Lego series. It was like these Lego sets, and I don't think there was ever any official like comic books or there like were some lore, but it was basically like off-brand Indiana Jones, because this was before Lego had the rights to everything under the sun. And he like there was like an Egypt one, there was a dinosaur one, there was a jungle one, and he would like go and like do like he would build like the booby traps that he would like escape. And I was obsessed with him, and I would wear his like little hat. Like it was like a fedora meets a cowboy hat, and I would pretend to be him in public places.
That's so great. I love that.
As a child, I couldn't just like be obsessed with like a character everyone knew.
You had to be the character.
I had to be a niche character. And poor mom trying to explain it to people. So Beck is going. I like the traps. They're fun. They're cool. He's like going around.
He gets all the plans for 2 of the 3 bridges or 3 of the 4 bridges, something like that. He's like, well, this is not in the plans. Oh, well, I'll just go for it, I guess.
Yeah. He gets the eye, and he falls in the scorpions. The scorpions are after him. Selket stands. They're pissed. That is the scorpion goddess. She has no rep in this movie, and so sorry to the scorpion people out there.
Yeah, he uses the
eye
as like a deflect. Yeah. It's like, okay, that's interesting.
So he gets back. Now it's daylight. Zaya is bait. So they're like trapped, and they're like, give back what you stole. And he gives back these jewels that he took. I'm like, smart. And then they're gonna still kill them, but he uses the eye to like blind them. They very easily just get in this chariot, and they're in the city. And I'm like, where are they going?
Well, because also this happens a couple times in the movie, and this happens in a lot of movies, but I noticed it a lot this movie is someone will go, wait, and the person who's their antagonist turns around and looks at them, and then something happens. I was like, never turn around when someone says wait, just go and do what you're about to do. Like, that would have been the end of the movie for Beck. It would just been killed. Or should whatever his name is should have just like kept walking, and then they would have been fine. Well, they wouldn't have been fine.
They would have been fine.
The bad people in the movie would have been fine.
Yeah. So they're going through the city, and then according to the will of Christopher Nolan, Zaya gets shot by an arrow. The girlfriend always has to die. The wife always has to die. And so she's shot, and they get to so he's just been chilling. Horus has been chilling in this tomb, apparently. Like, everyone knew enough, like, where Beck, who's not even a stan, like, finds him easily.
And he kind of insinuates that people go and worship him there.
Yeah.
He's like, are you a worshiper? He's like, no.
So he's like, Beck's like, hey, I got your eye, babe. And Horus is like, well, give it to me.
Eyes. Got your eyes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Beck's like, I'll bring it back if you bring back my girlfriend from the dead. Like, Jesus could do it, why can't you? You know, like, just saying.
And
You know?
Horus is like, Jesus who?
Jesus who? I don't know
Who
who
is
that
this man?
And he's like, well, I could if I was the king, because the king can make Anubis turn back. And I'm like, that seems very convenient. Turns out it's right. Also, Anubis is playing the job of Hermes in Greek lore, guiding people into through the underworld. So he gives Horus his eye, and Horus is like, help me become king and I'll bring Zaya back. You know, but they have 9 days.
Yeah.
Because she has to go through the 9 gates.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ishtar did in Babylon. We talked about that in our Book of Life episode, where she had to strip a new item of clothing at each gate. Yeah. I'm surprised that movie didn't do that to Zaya. Based on,
honestly, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So their plan is to get to Set's pyramid because Beck saw the plans. And they're gonna destroy his, like, they're gonna Spider-Man turn off the desert. They're gonna destroy the desert fire that gives Set his power. But they need something to do that. So Horus, they go to this mountain. Horus prays to Ra to get wings to go to the sun barge.
Yeah, because he can't transform without his other eye, like his full power.
So they go to the barge. And
in space, where it is confirmed that this takes place on a flat Earth. And it's not like paper thin flat. It's like a donut. It's like donut thick, dummy thick.
Kind of reminds me of like a cookie. Yeah.
Take a bite exactly.
Yeah.
Just like a crumble cookie.
You know, Gods of Egypt would have made more money at the box office if they released an Oreo line that was the world in Gods of Egypt.
And it's gold. And the cream is gold. Because also we have to talk about, I completely forgot about this. I doubt this is like even really intentional, but in the coronation scene where Osiris dies and the Horus is like got his blood on his hands and it's gold. Literally both of his hands are covered in gold. And I was like, oh my God, Jaime Lannister also had a gold hand in Game of Thrones. I doubt that was a visual gag. Unless it was.
That's the second Jaime Lannister reference.
So I'm telling you, he's playing Jaime Lannister, but in a skirt. That's what this says, right?
Because they say the god's blood is gold.
Yes.
Right. Which
so
is like
the Oreos, would they still be the black cookies, like the chocolate cookies, or would they be like the vanilla cookies and then gold frosting?
Vanilla with gold,
yeah, because whitewashing.
Nailed it. So Ra is like, you can get some sun juice in your little vial. To
Sunny D.
It's Sunny D. So Sunny D to Spider-Man turn off the desert. And then they have to, so Apophis is there. He's like this kind of like toothy butthole snake. And Ra fights him, and like he does every night. And he's like, I don't like Set, but like I'm not convinced you'd be that much better of a king. And that's like peak election day.
Peak election day. Like I don't like you, but I have to vote for you.
Well, because he's like, I don't know. I think you're both kind of bad. And I'm like, Set is like enslaving people and like killing all the other gods. Like,
and Horus has just been moping around.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know if Horus would be a great king, but
he could argue that like, well, Set has ambition. You've just been moping around. But what was I gonna say? I don't remember.
Yeah, so also there's no natural ramifications for killing the gods in this, because gods should be like embodiments of nature and like forces, like
right.
And not all gods are immortal. Like gods die in Egyptian mythology, they die in Norse mythology, but there's some kind of, even if it's not like the sun fell out of the sky, like there's some kind of like natural ramification.
Right.
But the gods seem almost like either superheroes or like leeches. Like there's no reason for them to exist. They're just like super powered.
Yeah.
And they're like, and that's another thing, like a lot of mythology movies treat gods like superheroes. And I think that is we'll get into why I don't think that works.
Well, this movie certainly does, because of Iron Man suits.
Yeah. so Horus thinks he needs to fulfill his potential by getting vengeance. So him and Beck go down to this waterfall, and he's like, "Get me water, mortal." And Beck's like, "My name isn't mortal. You low-key suck." And then they get attacked by minotaurs from Greek mythology, but they get attacked, and then they like fight them off. They fall down the waterfall. Set is like killing all the other gods, including his ex-wife Nephthys. He like rips her wings off. Very Maleficent. The movie, not the character, the Angelina Jolie movie.
Yeah.
He cuts off her wings. And he's like, I loved you, but like she's like, I saw potential in you, and thought we could be happy, but like we couldn't. And like I think it was because they were childless. But I think it's also because Set is like evil.
An asshole.
Yeah. And then so Set is like, "Hey, Hathor, mistress, can you use your bad girl, Mistress of the West pass to like help me find Horus and take over the underworld?" And then she's like, and he's like, "Oh wait, you're in love with Horus. Like, you're such a liar. Like how could you betray me like this?" And I'm like, "You knew what this situation was, buddy. Like." Yeah. I hate the way the men treat Hathor in this movie. When like her actions are like kind of like, yeah, they're a little like, okay, she's trying to do what she can to survive, but like that's pretty obvious that she's trying to do what she can to survive.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's like, I don't know, like you can't really be mad at that. Because it's like she doesn't do anything wrong. Like this was like, we can't argue that Set's doing this just so he can stay alive. Like he's obviously in power.
So she uses the demons to like teleport back to Horus. And so then like Set kills the other Minotaur, and he sends Anat and Astoret, his like side chicks, after Horus. So these snake riding baddies, you know, they're the worst anti-Phoenician propaganda since Christ the King, Lord of History, my high school history book. Because it was always like the Phoenicians are bad.
Damn.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that era.
Well, I think we get a lot of our alphabet from the Phoenicians.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. Phonics. Hooked on it, baby.
So they're Beck and Horus are in the old temple of Osiris. It used to be like these gardens where the poor people could be buried. And apparently Isis killed herself because she was sad in this. And I'm like, way to cut out the goddess of women. Like, way to just not make her a character. Like, way to just write her off. Like, literally, they're like, we don't need this character.
And the other thing is that like other gods come back to life. I don't even really know what the rules are, but those two never come back, and it's like they're just dead. Because I was like, well, they can't come back because, you know, whatever. I was like, no, there are no rules here. Like they could come back.
Yeah. And so this was a moment they're sitting there, and I'm like, yes, they're wearing vaguely gay outfits, right? Like there's a lot of skin showing, but it's like this movie is so committed to like making everything so straight that like they don't have friend chemistry. I'm not saying they needed to like be in love. That's not what I needed from this movie. Right. But like it's like this happens.
Well, it's a buddy drama.
Yeah.
It's like, definitely not comedy. Well, comedically bad at times, but yeah.
But like there needs to be a friend chemistry. I think that's one of people have talked about that. It's one of the advantages of Lord of the Rings over a lot of other male-centered action movies is that the men aren't afraid to be like, yeah, we love each other. Like we love, you know? And I think that's telling because it's based on a story that was written by someone who was a soldier, you know, who like understands that bond. And I think you get a lot of these like people who have never been soldiers. I'm not saying you have to be a soldier to like write, but like people who have never been soldiers who are trying to like emulate that bond, but they're so scared of like the masculinity is so fragile and fake that like they're so scared of looking gay that like we can't even believe that these people are friends.
Yeah, and having that through line would help the payoff in the end, because it does fall kind of flat.
But I also do think it's just like they're acting just in different movies, so that does not help that as well.
Disney versus Game of Thrones. Jamie Lannister would never act gay.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Whereas, did we all hear about? So Ben Shapiro's upset about there's a gay
About
character.
what now?
There's a gay character. There's like an actual gay character, not just a Disney gay character in their upcoming movie, like Strange World. And he's upset, and he's like, Disney's been forcing the gay agenda on us, like Hercules, Aladdin, and Tarzan. They're throwing these like shirtless hunks at us to give boys like confusing thoughts. And we were like, is Ben Shapiro? Are you admitting something, Ben Shapiro?
Shirtless hunks. Well, listen. God, what's the bad guy's name in Tarzan?
Clayton.
Clayton. I mean, Clayton's a hunk. You see it, but he's evil. But he's a
Yeah.
hunk. Look at those muscles. Come on. Jafar. Is that the
No.
one he was going for?
Well,
Or
no,
was
he
he
was-
going for Aladdin?
No,
Because
he meant
Aladdin's-
like Aladdin, Hercules, like the lead.
Aladdin's not like a hunk though. He's like a cutie.
Yeah, but
No offense to all the Aladdin stands out there. But...
yeah, no, but it's funny because he was like talking about how like subversive Disney is because the men are hot, and I'm like, they're supposed to
And
be
we're like,
ugly.
oh, are they? How hot are they?
How are they then? And so, but yeah, that's kind of like this movie is.
Rasputin, yeah, and Anastasia, absolutely.
I was gonna say Dimitri and Anastasia is
Oh,
super sexy.
yes, absolutely. And then John Cusack, he brings like the heart and soul to that character.
That voice, this is like
yes,
Betta. Yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah, basically, my take on Gods of Egypt is this movie is not for the girls, gays, and theys.
And
It's like it's so just like straight to its detriment. Like I would say Aladdin, pretty straight movie, right? Like, but there's especially for like that era of Disney, because Little Mermaid's pretty gay, but like Aladdin's pretty straight, but there's enough of like Aladdin and Genie. It's not a sexual bond. I mean, I'm sure there's fanfic out there, but Aladdin and Genie have a friendship, right? Like you know, like they have chemistry, you know.
Would
like
you say it's because Genie doesn't look as human as Aladdin, and so like
people are comfortable with it?
Yeah, because they're like, oh, well, like two beings who don't even share the same material can't be gay together. But I also find
the humor, right?
Yeah, I think it's the
that's
humor.
true.
I think because there are movies that are able to portray, you know, male friendship.
Yeah.
And yes, some people will take that and do it. You will. That's why we have AO3. But like, you can do it. Like, it's just if you're too worried about like we have to be super straight, sometimes you get these very empty feeling movies.
The one that I thought did it really successfully, I just can't remember the name. Paul Rudd, Jason.
See, I Love You, Man?
Siegel. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Like that story was really, man, that was a good one. And like a really good buddy comedy.
Yeah.
So we're saying that you need comedy to be friends. And this
maybe that is what I'm saying.
Not funny. I think that's a great theory. It honestly is.
Yeah, I think because friends are funny, like they banter. You know,
there was no banter.
The quote unquote banter. Like I think they try. Like the I'm no mortal thing. I think like or no.
I have a name.
He says something like, are you trying to be funny? Like when he's like up on the Roz mountaintop, and then he turns Horus is like, do you think I would spend any time trying to amuse you? And I'm like, damn. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why this movie again could have worked if it was a little more Disney, because they could have had like a Disney movie is like has that comedy and also the high stakes, like the magic, the adventure, but there's usually like some levity in there, but it's still like you still feel for the characters, right? It's still high stakes. And I don't know. I'm not, because I like movies that aren't like that. I'm not saying every movie has to be like that. I don't think it needs to be
Disney. I think it needs to not take itself so seriously.
Exactly. You know, Thor, because Thor is such a good, I wouldn't say the first one, but I would go with like Ragnarok is like walks that line. Gloss over those. But like the humor and really good actors and being able to elevate that material, and you're also dealing with life and death stakes. I also, another Marvel reference, I did not remember or even put together until I saw this again, the Thanos like putting kind of the gauntlet with like that really struck me as like, oh my god, I know Marvel comics have been around for years, so I'm sure Alex was inspired by that, or the writer. So that was really interesting putting that together.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of coming down to the theory of like, this would have been more of an effective relationship if they had any sort of comedic connection, like having levity
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Because I mean, trauma bonding is a real thing.
Yeah.
That's how Cullen and
Yeah.
I became friends. Literally squeezing each other's thighs when someone would say something crazy in class. You know, we're having a comedic moment. We're building a rapport. We have banter, and yeah, I think it's an excellent theory.
Because that's how people are. You respond to, not everyone, but like most people respond to drama with humor, and it's not like they're making
Yeah.
light of it. It's just like, I don't know what else to do because I
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
function, right?
Yes.
You know?
Coping.
Yeah. Okay, so these Astrid and Nat, these antagonists from the Bible, one of the most sold books other than Harry Potter, they attack them, and then they use wits like back as bait, and then they defeat a gnat, I think. Yeah. And then I looked up to figure out which one was which. And then Hathor shows up and she uses her goddess of love powers to control Astoret's snake, because you wouldn't control Astoret because two girls, they can't do that. It's gonna only be a girl and a giant snake monster, as God wanted. But so she gets the snake, and I thought she was just gonna be like, hey, snake, you don't need to kill us, we're friends. But she's like, no, burn yourself, bitch. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Brutal.
Brutal. Yeah.
So cute. Yeah. Also, another little visual Game of Thrones thing. They're riding these cobras that breathe fire, and the one is blonde. Which one is that?
Annette
is blonde. I was like, Khaleesi.
So yeah, the snake burns up, killing Astoret, and then so Hathor saved them. And then Horus is like, these hoes ain't loyal. I'm mad at you. And she's like, we just need to stop set. Like, she's like, I was just doing what I need to do. But like, okay, go off, king. You know, like, not king.
They're burn. They're literally like negging each other, but it's like he has no right to be mean to her. If he was kind of negging her to begin with. So it was like,
she saved him. He would have killed, Set would have killed him. Yeah.
So I don't understand their relationship. Just gonna say it right now. Their romance, don't root for it.
Oh, don't buy it. Yeah.
Toxic.
And so they're going to solve to like get help to solve the riddle of the Sphinx. And so they're walking through the swamp. No crocodiles there. Sobek stands, the crocodile god. They're pissed. No Sobek rep in this. And then so Horus and Hathor are like doing their kind of like whatever, and he's like carrying her, and then he's mad at her and he drops her in the swamp.
Second time that he's gotten her wet in a way that she didn't want, because he also throws her into the tub with him at the beginning of the movie. And she was like, no. She said no, and then he's like right into the water.
Yeah, ALS challenge. Yeah, so they're going, and then but she actually, I think the best chemistry in this movie is Beck and Hathor.
Yes, it's not like there's not like a romantic thing.
No.
It's just like a sort of like a mutual respect.
And even just like you believe her as this goddess of love interacting with someone who has so much love in his life. Like that's the only time they actually any of these characters feel like a deity in any way. You know, I'm not asking for like an Aslan, like a Christ allegory, but just like that she's a manifestation of some kind of force in the universe, you know?
Yeah, because she tries to use her like powers on him and it doesn't work.
And she's like, who is she? You know?
Yeah, and she's like, clearly your heart belongs to someone else. And I mean, and she kind of like plays a sort of advisor role, which I think makes sense for a deity of this power. Like, a guiding figure, you know?
Yeah, and he's like,
and she finds her purpose in a way as well, and like puts her back on track.
Yeah, because she's like, well, I'm certainly not going to do this for Horus anymore. I'm going to do this for Beck.
Yeah. And then like sacrificing herself for love and like wanting to go back to like, I worked so hard not to be the mistress of the West. And yeah.
But she's like,
I think her character is great.
Yeah, Hathor was actually my favorite character in this movie. I mean, I don't think the movie respects her.
No.
But I do.
In spite of the movie, I respect her.
Yeah, and then so because she's asking about her, and he's like, yeah, Horus is great. Like Zaya really believes it in him, and like he's gonna bring her back, and like that's better than I thought he was. And Hathor's like, yeah. And then
Totally.
she's like, Horus, what the fuck? And he's like, tee, I lied. Humans don't matter. And she's like, and then he's like, I wrote my notes. I think I said, uh, he's my disposable twink girly pop. You are a hoe. I don't understand the idea that you could have used deception for self-preservation. So it's like he's lying to Beck to like help him achieve his goals. He doesn't understand that Hathor could have lied to help preserve herself.
Yep. Because he has no empathy. Like that's why he can just be so casual and blasé with Beck in Beck's life and Zaya's life, is that like he has no empathy for humans. And it's like it doesn't make sense. Like why? Like they worship you. What is it that you hate?
Well, that's it's a common motif in mythology adaptations because gods often don't have empathy for humans.
Right.
But I don't think this movie fully explores or resolves that issue because Hathor obviously does. But like Horus, I like the idea that Horus needs to learn that these people are valuable, and that's what like helps him achieve his goal. But I don't really buy the journey.
Yeah, because we don't have a starting place. Because like, I mean, I guess you could say like he just sees them as like fuck puppets because they're literally like lying on the floor after he had like a rager the night before the very beginning of the movie. But like other than that, it's like it's not a coronation. He's like, I don't want to be king. I don't want to rule over these people, you know?
Yeah.
It's like he was happy to be king.
Yeah, there's a poor setup with him.
So they go to this big tree. They find Toad's secret library run by his little like clones. It makes me think of SpongeBob's brain in that episode. Remember, only fine diving and breathing. We threw out his name. And then
I was just thinking about like the production of that and how many times Chadwick Boseman had to walk in different ways with different items. And just like, I imagine that would have been like probably one of the easiest days on set, but also one of the most boring.
Yeah, all those plates for all visual effects magic. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it looked great. I was like, I love this.
Yeah. And he's talking about lettuce, and I'm like,
triggered.
Man, yeah, that is triggering now. Yeah.
You cannot go to Sweet Green anymore. You're like,
I don't think I will ever buy lettuce again.
So
kale. All the kale.
So he's like, I can't risk losing the knowledge of the universe. Set is out here destroying everything. I need to catalog everything that
and he's only 47% of the way through.
Yeah.
And he's hung up on lettuce.
Yeah.
Wild.
Wow. So Beck is like, I think you're just scared of not knowing the riddle. And he's like, you think that'll work? And then like he's like, okay. And he also made
kind of wild that Beck, a mortal, can easily manipulate Thoth, the god of wisdom, essentially.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And then he also makes Hathor turn around so she can't like use her powers.
And there's an excellent sex joke in there. She's like, oh, you just like the view from behind? He was like, well, yeah, but also. I'm like, wow. Oscar for this screenplay, please.
But also this woman, this goddess, this cow goddess just fell in a swamp. And
she looks fantastic.
She looks fantastic. I love movies do this all the time with everyone, but especially with women, where it's like, I literally just like fell in a swamp. I look like I'm ready for a red carpet.
Yeah, and also like her dress has been like ripped and stuff. Because at first, and during the swamp section, Horace is like, your dress is like crazy or whatever, and it's like it's a bit much.
And she's like, I'm the goddess of being too much. And I'm like,
and then like it gets ripped, like part of it gets ripped. He's like, well, now it's too little. And I'm like, what is this banter?
And he's like, did you get that from him? And it's like, she's like, yeah, I picked from the options I had.
Yep. This has the most cloth.
It's like, you were too busy moping in a tomb to buy me a dress, buddy. Like,
yeah.
Apparently buying dresses for women is a big deal in this Egyptian society. That's the first thing Beck does for Zaya.
Just steals a dress.
A dress.
So yeah, Toth. But they come to him without knowing what the Sphinx is going to ask them.
Yeah.
So they go there basically with the intention of like, will you come with us? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was confused. I was like, you don't have the question. How is he going to give you the answer? And they're like, well, come with us. I was like, was that the point of the scene?
So they're going they're walking through the desert to Set's pyramid. Hathor uses her little sand powers to help Beck talk to Zaya. She's at Dead Guy's Judgment Hall. There are these dead zombie pharaohs judging people.
Yeah.
So rich guy, his stuff gets him in. Poor grandma, she's eaten up. She doesn't have enough money. She just has a little ring.
Mm-hmm.
And Beck is like, Horus is so great. You were right. He's gonna help us. And Hathor's like, yeah. So they go to the pyramid, and Beck like just kind of guesses and gets in, and then they all get in.
This is the pyramid, where like
Super Mario has to go through the little stomping rocks, right? That was that level of Mario 64. Yeah.
But this is where Set's whole like power structure thing is, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing guarding it is the Sphinx.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just gonna say this. I think I said this on Black Cauldron episode. These villains need to have better security. The Sphinx, granted, is way more powerful than what the whatever that guy was called.
The Horn King, yeah.
The Horn King, yeah. Better security than what he had going on. But it was like the Sphinx was gonna just like keep letting them answer.
Yeah.
When they got it wrong, and I was like, no.
Yeah. I thought you had
No.
one chance in death.
Yeah.
Also, the Sphinx, typically female, another female erasure. The Riddle Sphinx, we may know her from everyone's favorite.
# Gods of Egypt hates girls.
Gods of Egypt hates girls.
Reference to Glee. Reference to Glee boot.
So the Sphinx, we may know her as everyone's favorite minor character and everyone's favorite incest story, Oedipus. Where she
everyone's favorite incest story. Yes.
Yeah. She asks Oedipus, I think it's like, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 3 legs in the evening, and it's a man. So the riddle here is something about like, it's like a lot. It's like what's never will be but always is, or and Tote gets it wrong. He's like it's purity, it's order.
Yeah, first order, then purity. And meanwhile, Toth is just like jumping out of the way, and Horus is getting smacked around by the Sphinx, who is like emitting sand.
Yeah.
Like, every time it moves.
And then Beck is like, think like a mortal. But I'm like, why doesn't Beck answer the riddle then? Because then it implies
this is where the protagonist stuff comes in for me. Just saying.
Yeah, because then Tote does know the answer, but I'm like, oh, he's a god of wisdom. He should know the answer. But if he doesn't know the answer, it's because he's a god, and that limits his like understanding.
And that's sort of what they get to. But then he's like, why would I think like that? And then he's like, oh, you're tomorrow. And I laughed so hard. Lyle was watching this with me, and the Sphinx, they give him the answer, and he goes, "Oh bother," and Lyle
like
goes,
Winnie the Pooh.
It's so terrible. I know.
And I died. I was like, "Oh my god, you're right." Oh, it was so fucking funny. And I'm like, "Is the Sphinx wearing pants?"
Maybe.
I don't know.
Beck should have said to Tote, think like a little red-headed orphan in a really bad play about 1930s and 40s politics.
He's
like,
they still
tomorrow?
continue to make.
And that I was in and had to sing a song about Herbert Hoover. Okay. So Set springs a booby trap. He knows they were coming. But Beck is like, oh, I got the juice, and I think of the corn song, and he's like, he's gonna pour it into the whatever. He's gonna Spider-Man turn off the desert. And then Set is like, he lied to you. And he's like, no, he's not. And then he's like, yeah, he can't do that. And then Beck is like, you're not pretending to be plastic. You are plastic. You are a mean god, Horus. And because it's the same. It's Janice and Caddy. That's what I see. And so then he hesitates. So Set destroys the juice. They're like, no. And then the pyramid collapses.
Why?
We love
Why?
collapsing. We love it. And then he kills Tote and he takes his brain.
Yeah, that was intense, because I don't remember exactly when it happens after this, but like literally like they're literally bringing the body parts of other gods to him and basically turning him into a transformer.
Yeah. So they escape, and Hathor is like, I'm the goddess of love, and love is even among the dead. That's what she kind of says, like how she's Mistress of the West. She's like, the least I can do is give you my star bracelet so you can help Zaya get into the afterlife. And then so she gives it away. Horus is like, no, and then she gets taken away by her bad girl past.
Yeah,
'Cause
she summons Anubis and says,
Yeah.
give him safe passage to go give this to his girlfriend /
Yeah.
wife.
And again, she tries to explain her bad girl past and is like, I was easily seduced. And I'm like, did the demons seduce you? Like, I don't understand. I guess the sequel was gonna explain it. So then so he gives Zaya the bracelet and he's like, yeah, Horus sucks. And Zaya, she has the faith of a kid in a Christmas movie. She's giving Christian girl Autumn. She's like,
Yes.
I believe in Horus still, even
Only
though
a
he
Christian. Like, this movie is very Christian, because like you even said, like in the lore, that like people would discard gods and they were just like, I don't think that's cool anymore. And it's like, she's like, no, Horus, he's a good guy. And I'm like, Zaya, you weren't here. He was actually really mean.
And then but then Set is like, the afterlife is canceled, babes, and Anubis is like holding off like the end times because Set has become super god. He has wings of Nephthys, eye of Horus, heart of Osiris, brain of Tote. And I wrote, these gods are avengers. They're not gods. Like
Yeah. And he has like a mega suit version of his now he's winged and popping off with that eye, and like he's got a third eye.
Yeah.
And then he goes up to the space barge.
Yeah.
And
I also wrote, Zaya believes like Gerda, shout out to the Snow Queen. Yeah, Set is mad that Ra favored Osiris. He goes up to the sun barge. And I'm like, I wrote, wow, way to plagiarize Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
It's a classic setup, and he's like, Osiris had the test of like giving his power away, and he passed. Your test was to be childless and alone in the desert. And I'm like,
and you failed. You handled that without class. How dare you?
I'm like, that's
you resented the person who did that to you. How dare you? You should have just gone to therapy like everyone else.
Not super fair, but okay.
Not fair at all. I did not that I felt for Set, but I was also like, this is a bullshit argument.
Yeah. And then he's like, you can fight the serpent with me on the barge. And Set is like, no. He's like, I want to conquer everything and live forever. So that's okay. That's, I guess, it's Set's goal. And I guess that lines up with what he's been doing.
Sure.
Until. So then Set kills Ra because he can do it because he's super god, but he wants to impress Ra, I thought.
Yeah.
There's daddy issues off the charts. And so Set is like summoning the butthole serpent to destroy everything.
Because it's coming through the underworld, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what Anubis is trying to
holding
stop.
back. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know what your plan is because you wanted to live forever, but you're gonna like end existence.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's giving Lucifer, which is fine. Lucifer, God's biggest disappointment, as I like to call him. But it's like, it's not like, I wonder if this is where Jerry's rewrites are coming in. Because it's like he was trying to have like a backstory. And
I love
like
that we're calling him Jerry. like at least Alexis has like a reason. We're just like, oh yeah, Jerry.
Like he could have like, it's like you're either like, I have tragedy and I'm trying to like cope with that by taking over the world, or you just want to end existence because you're an embodiment of chaos. It's hard to be both.
Yeah, because I even say like he's bringing about chaos, and actually I watched it with the CC because there were so many things happening and being said to me that I was like, I need the CC on, and I never watch with CC because I was like, I need to be able to read things, and they had chaos capitalized as if it's like it's like a proper noun, like it's an event or a
In
thing.
in Greek mythology, it is.
That's what I thought. I was like, I don't think this is an Egyptian thing. I don't know. But yeah, it's they're literally bringing about chaos, which goes against the whole like, well, I'm gonna live forever. It's like, well, if there's no one around to remember you,
If
there
a
you
tree
go.
falls in the forest, are you sung by a
Yes,
band?
it does. It does make a sound because physics and sound waves. Anyway.
All right, so Horus and Beck, they get back to the capital with the help of Nephthys' bird ship that she's helping them from beyond the grave. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
They bully the architect. He takes them up the obelisk, but then like Beck and the architect are fighting, and he's like, I'm rich. I'm ready for the underworld. And he's like, the underworld is canceled. Have fun, incel. And then he like knocks him off, and then Horus is fighting Set, who's way stronger, but then he's using himself as bait like they did earlier, so Beck gets the eye out. And then he's like falling, but then Horus does the bare minimum, saves Beck over his eye. I'm like, wow, we stand a modicum of empathy. But he learns to love, so he gets his falcon powers so he can bring Beck down. Now he learned to care for his people. Okay, so Beck dies later, because first he just fights Set and then kills him. I thought it was going to be like the power of that's Disney. I thought it was like the love that he formed was going to defeat Set. I'm like, oh no, it's just like he physically beats him up.
Yeah, Horus does.
Yeah.
He well, because I actually thought this moment was kind of interesting where he's like, Set's like, I saved you, I spared your life. I mean, I did rip out your eyes, but I spared your life. And he's like, you have that choice now. And Horus is like, yeah, but that's not what I'm gonna do. Stab.
Yeah.
But Set is literally trying to like end existence.
Yeah.
Like he wouldn't have just like retired. I get it.
Yeah, because he's like, I'm not gonna be that dumb.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
There's a lot of discourse on TikTok about how Batman and Superman are like, we don't kill people, and Wonder Woman is like, yeah, I fucking do. Like, and she's like, that's why I don't have all these famous villains, because once I defeat them, it's over.
They're fucking dead.
I don't put them in like a poorly secured asylum and wait for them to come back.
Yeah, she's like, it's a trolley problem. Like, if I let them live, they're just gonna keep doing this over and over again and kill more people. I'm saving people by killing one person.
Yeah.
So you're saying as if women ruled the world. Yeah.
Listen.
Hey. Yeah.
For Batman, the not killing thing is purely for his own ego.
Yeah.
Because he's still being a vigilante and like being actively violent. So like, yeah. So Horus resurrects Ra, Ra fights off Apophis, saves the world. I said Beck dies, giving one last shitty, poorly delivered one-liner. He died as he lived.
He did.
Burn. Yeah.
Because Horus comes down and is all like, you could be a god. You're great. And you're not like those mortals. Like, you could be a god. And then Beck is like, what would I be the god of? Being stupid. And then he's like, the impossible. And then Brandy and Whitney Houston come out. No, and and then Beck dies. So he lays Beck next to Zaya, and Ra comes up and is like, I'll give you anything, even power over the wind, the thing you lied about in your job interview. And Horus is like, actually bring back my emotional support twink and his Christian girl Autumn girlfriend. And so he brings them back. But Beck first like gets up and talks to Horus. And I wrote, which I wish was gay, but it's just sexist. It's just that he comes over from the dead and the first person he looks to is Horus, not the woman he's laying next to.
Who also, it's her corpse, right? She would be rotting. Let's just like be real about that. Yeah, she's right there. Like, you would think like he comes to very quickly, but even then he would like kind of look around and be like, oh my God, Zaya. And then no.
Yeah.
No.
No. So they kiss. They have a special Zaya and Beck.
Horus and Beck kiss. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Zaya's like, I'll watch. Yeah.
Because he's like, yeah. Because Horus is like, yeah, cool, bro. Well, your girlfriend's getting up, and he's like, oh yeah, that's right.
So they have a special place in the kingdom. Horus is king. All the gods are back. Now you can get into heaven by doing good deeds. Martin Luther still shaking. So everyone is happy. Beck is like, go save Hathor from her bad girl past, my boy. We're getting a sequel. The goddess Isis, so mad she made white Americans finally care about whitewashing. So this movie did not get a sequel. And that is the end of the Gods of Egypt story.
Wow, what a journey. I mean, I would say it's about the friends we made along the way, but I still don't think that Horace and Beck are friends.
Yeah.
I think you put it correctly that he is like his emotional support twink.
But you make me understand that empathy is a good quality.
Yeah, he's a tool to him.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the vibes and the aesthetic of the world. I hate the robo gods and that the gods were tall. Other than that, I thought the world was cool, the effects were cool. And yeah, it was visually stunning.
Yeah, I love the like the vaguely ancient Egyptian-esque music. Love it. Love a good ancient Egyptian-esque soundtrack. The actual like design, I didn't mind the robo gods. I thought it was kind of interesting. It's sort of pulling on the fact that like obviously they're represented as human in their human form because they live amongst the mortals, but they have sort of maybe a true form or like a power form.
Yeah.
I did think like the metal. I don't even know if it's actually metal. I don't know. It looks metalish.
Yeah. I wish it was less robo. I'm not against it as a concept.
Okay, I get that. Yeah,
well,
it is. It's basically like it's the Iron Man suit. That is kind of weird. I wish it was more like I don't know, like a transfiguration in Harry Potter. Like actual, I'm talking like actual, like bird heads. That's what I want.
In terms of the look, I'm probably too critical, but working in visual effects and the previs tech was part of it. You know, they had a lot of challenges, and I just want to acknowledge that first. It was really challenging to shoot, but I think a lot of it just looked very video game-esque, which I don't like, and it's a lot of like I specifically call my husband over for like the shot where she got shot in the beginning or towards the beginning was just like the backgrounds. Like it was just something that could have been so much better. And I know like, I'm sure budget, it was huge on the film. It was a huge movie, but just stuff like that I thought was pretty disappointing. And yeah, like it's the sets, I have to say, being on set, they were so cool, and the work that went into them is incredible, and everyone, you know,
was a lot of it practical? Was there still
a lot of set extensions, but a lot of it was practical. Like it was cool, like the part that at the very end that Horus climbs up with the hieroglyphics, like that was built. The wire work was really cool. The stunt team on set was like such a great group of people, and like so much, you know, it's like, how does a god fight, and kind of trying to design a look for that was really interesting. And we worked with them with the previs. It's in terms of like the like costume design was fantastic, and I will say our editor was awesome, and just like, you know, you can only do so much with what you're given. But yeah.
So in terms of like what you guys went into production with, like, do you know if there's like sections of the story that have just been cut? Because I do find like as a whole, whatever is going on feels pretty tight, but it also feels like there's probably stuff missing, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, it's been so long, I can't remember what exactly has been cut. I know a lot of our action scenes made it in there. I just remember being really surprised at how the script just looked like a rainbow. So I'm sure, they did the best that they could with trying to keep it as consistent. I think running time was also probably an issue, and with budget, and they probably had to make some cuts because of that. And I think it still runs over 2 hours.
It does.
Yeah.
Because we got like maybe an hour in. I was like, okay, there's like maybe another hour left. I was like, an hour and a half. Oh my God. I still have to watch Glee tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I fell asleep the first night. Not because I was particularly bored, but just I was tired. I put it on and then I was like, okay, I can only watch so much. And then yeah. And I do think you're right in that I think there's a caveat in that I'm like, okay, that's some cool CG. Like that looks cool. Like, I mean, like if you were to draw that for me, I'm like, oh, that's a cool creative design. But like the CG is never gonna look as cool as the practical stuff, right?
Right.
Like I think like when it comes to costumes, like physical sets, those are always gonna look better than less like CGI.
Yeah.
I would think of, I mean, this is a budget thing, but that ABC's Once Upon a Time, some of they'd have rooms that were entirely CGI, and it was always like, yeah.
I find that hard to watch shows that rely too much on that, because it is so it just kind of takes you out of the world. Like stuff that's shot practically is so much and I love visual effects, and people that work in visual effects are so incredible what they do. And I think, unfortunately, just to make it look really good, you can't necessarily do it as much with TV shows. Although I know, now with the new Hobbit series, blanking on the name, but like they're spending more and more money on that to be able to have the time to make it look better, because you just need time and you need money to make it look as the strongest visual effects out there.
But that's also like the most expensive show ever made.
Yeah.
I also think the video game aesthetic, I actually think like for me it helps the fact that like establishes that this is a very fake world. Like we're not talking about like a real Egypt. There's not really that kind of reference. But then on the other hand, the story in the movie itself takes itself very seriously. And so those things kind of conflict, which is interesting.
Like, you think it would have been better if it was a little more campy and not
a little
like
more tongue-in-cheek.
Oh my God,
yeah, like, and not even in a totally corny, like, we're not saying we want Shrek, we're saying we want like,
I mean, I want Shrek, I love Shrek.
Yeah.
But like,
also
just
a great musical. Yeah.
But like a fun kind of like coming of age adventure, with like instead of Set being like some tragic badass daddy issues, like just let him be this kind of conniving villain, and like this kind of epic love story. I think that could have really worked.
I think something that maybe is, for me at least, a good marker for what I would want from it is The Scorpion King starring The Rock. You guys ever see that movie?
No,
but I do love The Rock. Anything with him.
It's very early in The Rock's career. I think it's one of his very first like leading roles. But basically that movie, I think, I mean, I have no background in visual effects at all, but I think like that may have a similar sort of game look, sort of game design look, that I think helps you. It doesn't ground you in like a real thing that's happening. It's sort of this make-believe world. That movie is kind of like, it's campy and tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, but there's still like a cohesive story. I don't know, I think maybe that's sort of like the tone I want. So if you guys ever have a chance to watch it, report back to me, because I feel like that would be a great tone, especially with like the current visual effects. And the story itself it's so bananas. It's like, why are you taking yourself so seriously? Like, you're talking about this crazy story about Egyptian gods. It's like, we can have fun with this, okay?
Yeah.
Nikolai, we can have some fun.
Yeah, smile, buddy.
Jerry was having a lot of fun, you could tell.
Yeah, Jerry was a character.
I would say the rules of the world are a little vague, but the rules of Egyptian mythology, pretty vague. But again, I think this is where I want to say it's because they're treated like superheroes. Yeah. Like Hathor talks about like love even being among the dead, but the way they were like, okay, she's the goddess of love, so she can like seduce people unless they love someone else. Like she can like
glamour people, like in like
Dungeons and Dragons, or something like that. Like this very like this happens with a lot of like nerd media, which is a weird thing to say, but because of like the way like Dungeons and Dragons and video games have taken fantasy and made it follow very like rules, which I think is good. It's good for things to have rules, especially in a fantasy world that keeps from just being random garbage. But like, it can, when you're doing something, especially like a god that's like this entity, it can, reducing them to just someone with some special powers, can kind of ruin the story, I think, or ruin what makes, like, the story of these Egyptian gods has been around for centuries, right? And obviously it resonated with people. It like meant something to them. And to turn it into just superheroes like punching each other, just like superpowered people like fighting over world domination, I think we're losing something that, like, we're losing what made the story mean something to people. And I think you see this in a lot of adaptations of mythology, especially of Greek mythology. Like even like Disney's Hercules is very intentionally pulling on like Superman. Like the creators said they were doing that, And so turning into superhero stories, superhero stories are capitalist. They've always existed under some form of capitalism, and mythology hasn't. So they're just designed to be more marketable, or I don't know. There's like, I still can't figure out exactly what I mean by this, but myths have this meaning, complexity, and beauty to them. And they also have a lot of feminine power. And all that always seems to be stripped away in a Hollywood adaptation for a super powered male fantasy,
It's like they always turn it into an action movie when like it can just be like an adventure movie.
Or
like because even like the original quote unquote original story that you told us, they're not fighting, they're turning into hippos and they're like building stone boats, like they're doing things that aren't fighting. It's like a skill, it's part of the adventure. It's a challenge, not a fight against each other. But this was very much fighting against things. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still trying. I think the genres are often combined, and I think I want to see what they look like apart, because I don't hate superhero stories.
Right.
I just think these genres, I think people keep complaining them, and it's not working. There's like, I don't think mythology movies tend to be very successful, and I think it's because of this, and I think people need to like step back, because I think like Hades Town, the musical, wildly popular, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very like, I think that really captures the myth and like what the story is about. And so we're kind of losing like the spirituality and the humanity of our ancestors that's like found in these stories. And I guess,
think that, can I just interrupt and just say,
please do.
I think it's really interesting. Like, you've done such an incredible job with your research and summarizing, and like I'm seeing things that I, to be honest, didn't even realize while working on this film.
Who could have ever predicted Come Let Us?
Oh my God, Come Let Us. I know. That always goes back to that. But I think that the problem with this story in particular is they focused on way too many characters. So it's really hard for that kind of setup, and just too many things going on in period that takes away from giving the story time to breathe and grow and set up those relationships as needed. But and part of that, like for myself, is and using myself as an example, I should say, I don't necessarily, didn't come into this movie knowing a lot about like the background. So with that, I think that's a big part of like, how do you treat a story that there's so many adaptations and ways to tell the story of like Set and Osiris, or I was looking at kind of some of the websites that you sent through that you were doing research with, which were really interesting. But I do think that's a part of it, is just that it's like, how do you, like, what part of the story do you tell? And something, it's funny, bringing back to Enchanted, I know they didn't need to retell what happened in Enchanted because everyone knew it. They could have just gotten into that, whereas with this, maybe more set up within the world and what drove our back to our buddy drama, like Horus, what is he trying to overcome, what's his big flaw, and it was kind of a bit wobbly, and it's hard to care about him because of his setup was pretty flat. So it's, I think that is a part of it for me, that I'm looking at like different adaptations throughout the past. Pride and Prejudice, like, you have kind of always those characters, and they're so, each one is successful but different. Just kind of having those few people. That's probably a really weird, very big deviation from this to Jane Austen.
I think
But-
you have a good point in that this isn't a story people just know. It's not Cinderella.
Yeah.
People don't know it off the top of their heads. You know, so you have a lot of adaptational freedom in that way and choices, and there's a lot of different routes you could take it. I think if I was adapting it, I would focus on at least the Isis Horus relationship, or at least Isis as the constant, as kind of this woman who maybe has this she has love for her family, also this desire for power, this conflict with her brother. You know, there's a lot of human drama of like, oh, you're my brother, but you killed my husband brother, and you're fighting my kid. You know, there's that you could, even though they're gods, you could focus on that like humanity, and that familial drama. And like, I mean, I think that's what, if we're talking about Disenchanted, the family stuff is what made it work for me. Like the magic, whatever, but like being like, oh, like the way she feels about like her stepdaughter and their relationship, like carried me through that movie.
Absolutely.
I
And
think,
that was missing in that.
Yeah, and Gods of Egypt. I think with fantasy,
Yeah.
you have to have that human element, because
Yeah.
in order for us to care about all the crazy, cool things.
Yeah, I think also that's kind of leading us into the conversation about who is the protagonist, because this story, I think you're right. It's like it pulls on a lot of different characters instead of focusing on the ones they actually want to develop, because they just had so many ideas they wanted to throw into it. So again, like if the idea of the protagonist, right? The person who has the strongest desire. It's like we don't know what Horus's desire is,
Other than
yet
vengeance, kind of.
Yeah.
Yet it's his
but when
story.
we start, we have no idea what he really wants. But yet by the end, we're like, oh, he needed to learn empathy in order to be a good king. Like, I think that would have been a great way to start. It's like he wanted to be king, but he was just like so mean to the people and so like meh about them. And then he comes to embrace them and learn empathy and become a good king. Great arc. Could have been there. But Beck,
excellent point.
He has the strongest, most consistent desire, and it is love, but it's specifically to save Zaya, to protect her, to give her what she wants. And so like that carries us through the story, even if like we forget it, because Horus takes over. So it's like they have two protagonists, but very strong desires that compete. And it's just not working.
Because it either could have been Beck's story about finding faith. In that case, Horus is someone you should be believing in, or it's Horus's story about learning humanity. Like one of them needed to have dominance over the other.
Yes, it's not that they can't both exist at the same time. It's just one has to take precedent.
Yeah, because and also because the Horus not having empathy thing, he either needed to be more human or more weirdly divine, and he was just kind of like a dick. Like he wasn't really, either. But Beck, I think I root for him more because he was at least motivated by love. I think you could have combined the Beck and Horus characters and depicted Horus as he is in the myths as a more younger, like reckless character. Not like a jaded. We love a jaded action hero in Hollywood, but like a more of a young, like, oh, like I'm gonna avenge my father, like a Luke Skywalker kind of deal. And you could have Tote as like the mentor and Hathor as, like you could make these gods this kind of like ragtag team, fighting set. I think that could have worked.
Do you think we have Beck because we need a human? Because like I'm looking at Clash of the Titans. I guess I just didn't realize that Perseus was a demigod. I think I just forgot that. So like he has God in him, but he's still very human.
Yeah. I think that sounds like a Hollywood note that you would get.
Yeah.
We need a human.
So I actually wonder if Beck was just like created because like, well, we need a human.
Well, isn't it also to help Horus start to care and see change his ways to be more empathetic?
So I think Horus was meant to be the protagonist and Beck was supposed to be that tool.
We connect more with Beck.
Because his desire is so clear from the start.
Yeah, and
he steals a dress for her. And he's so likable. I thought he was adorable. I rooted for him and Zaya, even though I was like, I know nothing about your relationship, but I hope it works out.
You kids have fun. And then so let's talk about our love interests. We have Hathor and Zaya. Zaya, you know, is a Christopher Nolan girl, like
She's
perfect
Rachel.
girlfriend.
She
She's
gets
Rachel.
blown up. Yeah. But then she gets brought back, unlike Rachel.
Like
R.I.P.
Rachel. Yeah. Hathor, I think, is the most interesting character.
Yeah.
I like that they have love in both a sexual and a compassionate side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did miss her cow energy. I'm like, this goddess does not seem like a cow goddess to me, but okay.
Yeah.
That's my niche.
What was the other that you said, like she was
She had a
either
lion aspect, Sekhmet, as like a lion warrior, like a
right? So
benevolent
maybe they were
cat.
channeling the lion because she's
Yeah.
fierce.
Fierce. I wish her sacrifice had taught more to Horus. We always talk about, do we support the romances? Like, do we like them? I don't
Not the
like.
Horus Hathor.
No, do not ship. Because he's mainly just like, she said something, he's all like, no, you're gonna wear that, you're gonna do this, he's like very protective. Because he says
that's not protective.
possessive,
That's
possessive, yeah. Because she says something like, oh, what about one night with you, Toad? And Horus is like, she won't be doing that. And I'm like,
yeah, and she's
who are
like,
you?
listen, we're not exclusive.
Yeah, we're not together, guy.
Yeah. But I like Beck and Zaya. How do you feel, Alexis, about our protagonists and their love interests?
I'm sorry. I really I don't like Zaya. I think, you know, just being crazy. What if Zaya had paired up with Horus and had to help him save Beck?
Yeah.
Why does it? She was just such a
she's not a character.
And that's also interesting because she starts with
so
heavy faith. And so that would be challenged by learning like, oh, this guy's a dick.
Yeah.
That would be way more interesting.
He has to learn.
Kill Beck, make Zaya our second protagonist.
He has to learn how to be worthy of Zaya's faith. Yeah.
Of his people's faith. Oh, that works so well for both of those stories.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We're gonna write it tonight.
Gods of Egypt Part 2.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
Gods of Egypt, the reboot. We're rebooting it.
Yeah.
Gods of Egypt 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. How do we feel about our antagonist Set? We have our secondary.
Too much.
Yeah, he's too much. Yeah, he's like a generic Satan, but he's also like, I think I like Set more as a trickster than as just like a tough idiot who wants to destroy.
As Butler?
Yeah, who just wants to destroy existence.
Yeah. Yeah, his desire's too simple and not nuanced.
Well said. Yeah, he's just and then from the acting perspective again, he's just playing it so straight and no one else is. And one of the lines when he's like, "You look glorious, my king," and he's just says like, "I know," and then cut. It's like, oh no, what was that?
That could have been a great camp, like queer-coded Disney villain line. Like Jafar or Scar could have pulled that off.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then his minions are really boring. The secondary good characters like Tote, Neptys, and Ra are all kind of generic.
Let's talk just like conservatively for 17 hours about Jeffrey Rush's hairdo. It's bald, white eyebrows, and then just like from the crown, there's a braid, a long white braid, and I'm like, what a choice. And I'm like, he needs to get off that sun barge. Also, how can he be so pale if he's like the sun? Is it because he's not getting that?
It's in the night a lot, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. He does. He spends all his time in space.
Yeah.
Looking at Cookie Earth.
Cookie Earth.
Yeah. I think there's also something interesting with, they're like trying to do something interesting with Set and Nephthys, but like she's more just like and
I think you're right. This relies too much on that original mythology. We're just like, wait, what's the relationship? Too bad she's dead now. Don't have enough time to talk about that.
It still just bumps me that gods can be killed as well. I know
and there's no rules.
Yeah.
Like
the lack of rules, the world rules.
Ra dies. And then but he's just like floating there. And then all of a sudden it's like, he's back. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all.
So I guess what was the message? I have no idea. I don't know
I,
what this movie is.
I don't even think it's love conquers all. Like that's like one of the most basic ones. I mean, I guess maybe, but
I said bromance makes human rights happen.
that's an interesting one. No idea.
Yeah.
I don't think it had a theme because I don't think it knew what it wanted to say. It just wanted Iron Man suits for gods.
Yeah, I think they wanted a good message in there, but it was definitely very convoluted.
Yeah. Like maybe
Yeah.
something about the divine right of kings. I don't know. But I guess that says, was that your fantasy? Alexis, was that your fantasy?
Ooh.
You're like, I lived this fantasy.
Well, from a working perspective, I had an incredible time working with my crew in Australia. It was my first job, so this movie experience itself was pretty awesome. The takeaway, I know a lot of crew members who work on films for quite a long period of time. We have no control over the final product of it. And it's, I think there were some moments that were a lot of fun and some moments that were laughable.
I loved this because I think it's not good, but it's very watchable. Like I could just sit there again. I think I said it before. Like I could sit there and just watch it again. Like I won't really be paying attention. I'm just sort of just like I'm just like here for the ride, Like I could pop an edible and watch that movie and have a great time. So I mean, yeah, I think it's my fantasy. I was like, I'm into it.
I'm gonna say it wasn't. I didn't hate watching it, but I was kind of like, oh my gosh. Like, I just think there's so much potential, and I think you see some really cool stuff. And he had a great cast, but I just think it suffered, and I've yet to see a mythology movie hit it out of the park where I'm like, yes, I love it.
Can I ask though, because it is such an obscure film that did not do well at the box office, what made you both want to dedicate an episode to it? Because I love that you are, and it's so fascinating, like the background, and I love Egyptian history as well. But I was so curious to hear that.
Well, I think I just started writing down like any fairy tale and fantasy movie I could think of in this like Excel doc and like kind of sorting them by what they were based off of. And I shared it with Hannah, and she was like, Gods of Egypt. Oh my God, we have to talk about it.
Yeah. Because I mean, I love bad movies. I love them. I don't know if you guys listen to How Did This Get Made? It's a podcast about bad movies. They also talked about this movie.
No way. I'll have to listen to that.
You have to listen to it. It's so good. But yeah, so like I love bad movies and I like making fun of movies just to be like, this is fucking crazy. And so there's just so much to talk about. That's the thing, is like we've been talking forever, but I could sit here for another 3 hours. Like if you literally had the time, I would. Like I'd be editing the episode, I'd split it into 3 separate episodes because I would just keep talking. But yeah, I think it's just there's a lot to talk about with whether it be the controversy of it coming out with the whitewashing stuff, whether it be like the actual lore that it's based on or loosely based on, just like what they end up doing with these characters. There's so much to talk about. It's so rich.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. Well, I feel like I've learned so much more than I ever thought from you both regarding all the story. It kind of makes you see it in new eyes. And again, that salad scene definitely.
I can't wait to tell. Second Lyle walks through that door, and we're probably gonna be recording the podcast. I'm like, guys, time out. I gotta go tell Lyle about cum lettuce.
Yeah.
I got a drink every time you heard us say cum lettuce, guys.
Yeah.
I hope no one gets hospitalized.
So yeah, our final question: what did we learn today? My thing is, you can ruin a really good story and kind of kill a genre, because I think this did kind of kill sword and sandals epics for a while, and also maybe stop imposing modern religious paradigms on ancient myth. I think that's why this genre sometimes suffers. Hannah, what do you think you learned today?
I didn't.
Yeah,
I don't
I didn't
know.
learn anything from
I-
lettuce.
Mine was like, but I've said come lettuce so many times. I mean, I think just like I used to know a lot more about Egyptian mythology and like the gods and goddesses and stuff, but like hearing it in that sort of story form was really interesting. I didn't really know much of that. And so like kind of applying it to the movie and kind of finding those little nuggets was really interesting. I don't think I learned anything. And that's
Alex,
fine.
that's fine. We don't always need to learn. Alexis, did you learn anything or any final thoughts?
Well, I think we cracked a big thing. All of us, we have decided that if there were humor, so maybe humor conquers bad movies.
Humor conquers bad movies.
I mean, so I agree. I think a lot of bad movies take themselves too seriously, and that's why they end up being bad, like humorously bad, kind of like this. Like it's taking itself way too seriously.
Yep.
Or no one's on the same page. Everyone's on a different colored page.
Yeah, different
Oh.
rewrite. Yeah.
Quite literally a different. She's like, don't say that to me.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, don't let your actors do rewrites. Period.
That should be a given. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Why are we still doing that in 2015, 2016? No.
All right, Alexis, anything you want to plug where people can find you or your work on social media?
Well, if any of you are getting married or want to check out a podcast called Altered, please check out my podcast that I host with my friend Dre. It's called Altered. If you are engaged, already married, just love stories. We had a great time making it, and Altered can be found at alteredpodcast.com, also on Apple Podcasts.
You can follow Not My Fantasy at Not My Fantasy Pod on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, there's no point in jumping on Twitter now.
Yeah, no, we're not getting
No,
on
wait
the
for the new Twitter part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're on
Close.
YouTube, hi, hello. You should definitely subscribe, hit that bell, hit the like button, leave us a comment, and then also hop on over, it doesn't matter where you're listening, to Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star review, send us a comment, let us know what you love. Let us know what you thought about Gods of Egypt and also the other movies that we talked about. Gods of Egypt, so many things to talk about. Did we miss something? Yeah, talk to us. We want to hear you. And share us with your friends and family. We want to have more awesome listeners like you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
But I hope I did make sense.
You did. This was so
amazing.
much fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like so many great insights. And also, I hope this is cathartic for you as well. It's just kind of like, wow, I forgot about all that stuff. Glad I got off my chest.
No, absolutely. Like, you both are so impressive, the work and the history and research you've done. I love it. Like, it's fascinating. And I want to
say come let us.
Yeah. Come on. If you do want to do a Clash of the Titans episode, I'd have to rewatch. It's been so long. I do not remember that movie, but I would so come back. You guys are so much fun to talk to.
We would love to have you back.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And listeners, tune in next month. Yeah, we will be
is this the
Lord of the
series?
Rings.
Oh my God, we've been talking about it. We've been making references to hobbits and stuff.
We have to talk about Lord of the Rings. So we will be starting with Fellowship. So see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Listeners.